I'd like to call this meeting to order of this Escalon City Council of the City of Escalon.
Councilmember Legero.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Alves.
Here.
And Mayor Swift.
Here. And I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. I'd like to give a special thanks to everybody who was able to make it to the budget workshop. I know there's an awful lot there, and there's an awful lot to understand, but I do appreciate you coming. I appreciate everybody coming to this meeting as well. I know we're going to have a number of topics tonight, so we're going to try to be as brief as possible. And it's great to see such a big crowd, and such a big crowd that I'm sure is willing to stay for the entire meeting as well. So let's just jump right into it. Presentations. Tammy.
So, Mayor, the second presentation on your agenda, the developer presentation from Chandler Enterprises, that one will be continued at the July 15th meeting. They were unable to attend tonight. But we do have one other presentation that's not on the agenda from the Wallace Foundation. If a representative would like to come forward. Dave.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Dave Wallace, and I'm joined here by my wife, Kim, Debbie Merkins, and Andrea Jones. We are members of the DW61 Foundation. The DW stands for Dennis Wallace. That was my brother, and his badge number was 61. 2.5 years ago, Dennis was a Stanislaus County Sheriff Deputy that was tragically killed in East County. Dennis spent 20 years working with the youth in the greater Stanislaus area, and out of his tragic death spawned a golf tournament and a foundation that raises funds for youth programs. And I am honored to say that we have passed the $50,000 mark in donations that we've been able to give to youth programs through various scholarships and other charitable donations. And it's through the people's generous support of the golf tournament. And in our last meeting, somebody who looks a lot like me recommended that we donate to one of the local youth programs here, the Escalon Police Explorer Program. So Chief Mike Borges, if you would please join us at the dais, we would love to present a $500 check from the DW61. Oh, you didn't tell me you were hurt.
What's the skateboard?
I used to get paper cuts. What is this?
That's great.
Certainly, if we could do that. I don't want to hurt Mike anymore. I know. No, it isn't.
By the way, Bob said thank you. Get everybody something to be afraid of.
It's temporary.
Another zero.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
What is the name of the other, the
After-school program?
that we gave the? Yeah, we were able to also donate to the Escalon Youth Center recently, and it's our pleasure to do so. So thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much for thinking of our community. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, Tammy. Thank you guys very much.
Yes. So next on our presentations is introduction of our Miss Escalon contestants. If Lexi can come up, and we'll have each of the girls come up and introduce themselves also.
Hi, I'm Lexi Prince. Thank you for having us today. I'm the Miss Escalon coordinator. I've been doing it for 3 years now, so I'm happy to have our girls here to introduce themselves to you. And we also want to extend the invitation to invite all of you to our pageant on July 10th. We hope to see you guys there. So I'll just have them come up one by one. Do you want anything in particular?
How do we buy tickets to that pageant?
How do we buy tickets?
Yep.
There's dates. I've put them on Facebook. June 28th, July 1st, July 2nd, and July 8th. at Main Street Stage. They're $25 a ticket.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Do you want anything special from the girls?
I don't know, just why are they running?
Okay.
Each of them. What
Okay.
what motivated them?
Okay,
name would help.
cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the names would be good too.
Yeah, what the hell, get crazier.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Alexandra Titsworth. I'm 16 and I am running for Miss Escalon because I want to set an example for my younger sister and younger cousins.
Alexandra, thank you.
Thank you.
And Representative Flores is got certificates for the girls too,
Oh,
that
Russell.
Russell is handing out to
Fantastic.
them.
Thank you, Russell.
Hello, I'm Natalie Cortez. I'm 17, and I'm running for Miss Escalon because I want to like inspire younger girls and like little boys to like be a part of the community and help improve it in any way that we can. So yeah.
Natalie, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's my greatest ambition.
Hi, I'm Katie Karp, and I'm 16, and I'm running for Miss Escalon because I've been living here my whole life and really want to give back to the community and be a good role model to all the younger ones.
Thank you.
Katie,
Thank
nice to meet you.
Perfect. Nice attitude so far. 3.
Hello, my name is Sage Davis. I am 17. I'll be a senior in the fall. And I would have to say that the reason why I'm running for Miss Escalon is I would love to be a role model throughout the community for my younger siblings, for just everyone, so that they have someone to look up to and someone that they can like inspire or aspire to be when they grow up. So, yeah.
All right,
Thank you.
very much, Sage.
Hi, I'm Maya Berry. I'm 17 years old. I'll be a senior this fall, and I want to be Miss Escalon because I want to be able to represent a very small community that, although small in size, has been able to impact the lives of so many. And with this title, I'll be able to influence younger ones to get involved as well.
Maya, thank you.
Hi, my name is Guadalupe Martinez. I'm 16. I'm going to be 17 next month, and I'll be a senior this fall. I'm running for Miss Escalon because I would love to represent this great community that I grew up in, and I would love to set a role model for my younger siblings.
Guillermina, right? Guillermina or Wilhelmina?
Guadalupe.
Guadalupe, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Guadalupe.
it's okay.
Well, I'm old,
sorry.
hard of hearing.
I haven't
Very
seen
nice to
old.
meet you,
I
Guadalupe.
don't like that. It's hard to hear.
I know.
Hi, I'm Trista Matthews, and I'm 16 years old, and I'm running for Miss Escalon because I want to be a positive role model for our small community.
Very nice, thank you.
Hi, I'm Ariel Stabi. I'm 17 years old, and I want to be Miss Escalon because I want to be a role model for younger children, and I want to show them that it's okay to be confident and to always believe in your dreams. Thank
Ariel,
you.
nice to meet you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Madison Bavaro. I'm 17. I'm also going to be a senior in the fall, and I'm running for Miss Escalon because I just really adore our small, special community. I think it's really unique and different. A lot of people don't have the opportunity like we do to grow up in like such a small, tight-knit community, and I would just love to have the opportunity to represent it to the best of my abilities.
Madison, appreciate it, thank you.
Hi, my name's Ashley Levine. I am 17 years old and will be a senior in the fall. And I would like to be Miss Escalon because I want to be a role model and inspire those in my community because everyone that has been a part of this community has inspired me, and I just want to give back. Thank
Ashley.
you.
Very good, nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Excellent.
so how many is that you were counting?
10?
How many?
10, yes,
Yeah,
10.
good job.
A lot, great group.
Great
Very
group.
nice, very nice to meet you guys. Very nice to meet you guys. So, thanks for coming to the meeting. And Tammy, the next thing we're gonna do is talk power or possibly the lack thereof. Sorry. Sorry, Dylan.
Yeah, so
Up all over
tonight
the plate, I had a swing at it. Sorry.
we have Dylan George with PG&E here to go over the community wildfire safety program that PG&E is implementing.
Thank you. Mayor Swift, members of the council, thank you very much for having me tonight, giving me a few minutes to talk about wildfire safety, a topic that I know is on the minds of many of us. My name is Dylan George, local public affairs representative for PG&E. I'm going to talk through our community wildfire safety program with a particular emphasis on the public safety power shutoff program, because that's the portion of it that may affect Escalon, and I know probably the part of it that you guys are the most interested in. And then I'd be happy to do my best to answer any questions. So PG&E's community wildfire safety program has 3 pillars to it. The first is monitoring and intelligence. So we have set up a wildfire safety operations center at our corporate office in San Francisco. It is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week during the peak fire season. We have expanded a huge network of weather stations throughout the fire-prone areas of the state, and also installation of high-definition cameras. All of this information gets fed into this Wildfire Safety Operations Center, and that's where ultimately decisions are made on things like if it's necessary to turn off power for public safety. The second pillar of our program is new and enhanced safety measures, and this comes in a few forms. One is vegetation management, tree trimming, tree removal, again in the high fire prone areas, where we've expanded our program of trying to remove trees, trying to keep our right-of-ways clear, expanding how much we trim back from the power line so that we can maintain that clearance at all times. In addition, another new and enhanced safety measure is accelerating our inspections of our overhead equipment in the high fire threat areas. We have deployed a lot of resources, including helicopters, drones, contractors, and even traditional people climbing poles to look at equipment on the poles, such as transformers, cross arms, reclosers. We want to make sure that before the fire season really starts in earnest, we did a lot of this work over the winter, weather permitting, because we want to make sure that before the fire season really gets going, that we have all of that equipment in the best working order it can possibly be in. So that all the enhanced inspections led to more work, more replacements than we would normally see, which is a good thing because we're upgrading the system. And then an additional part of new and enhanced safety measures is, again, public safety power shutoff, and we're going to talk quite a bit about that. So the third pillar of our community wildfire safety program is long-term system hardening. And what that means basically is replacing the overhead wire and poles that we have in the high fire prone areas of the state with something that's hardier, something that's more resilient, something that would have a better chance of withstanding high winds, tree contacts, the kind of things that you might see in these more terrains that are more prone to fire danger. PG&E has 7,100 miles of overhead electric line in high fire threat areas in northern and central California, and all 7,100 miles of that overhead line is going to get some prescription for system hardening over the next, say, 10 years or so. And again, a lot of that is going to be pole replacements, replacing wood poles with steel or composite material poles. Some of it's going to be replacing overhead conductor wire with what we call tree wire, which is a stronger coated wire that, again, if something were to hit it, it would have a better chance of not snapping and not creating public safety disasters. And in some cases, it will include undergrounding where that makes sense. We get a lot of questions about undergrounding naturally, but there are a lot of areas of the highest wildfire threat areas of our state where undergrounding would be pretty impractical because we'd have to dynamite through a hillside or something similar in order to get a line underground. But we are looking at more and more areas where undergrounding does make sense. So that's the wildfire safety program in a nutshell. And as I mentioned, here's a little bit about, I talked about the Wildfire Safety Operations Center. It's state of the art, kind of looks like something out of the Starship Enterprise or something. We, again, have it staffed 24 hours a day. PG&E has our own meteorology department internally. We also take in information from the National Weather Service and other partners, and we have deployed all of this equipment out in the field, be it weather stations, cameras, and all that, to monitor this wildfire threat throughout the whole fire season. So again, the majority of my presentation will be about public safety power shutoff. This is a program that PG&E implemented for the first time last year. We did call one event last year, one public safety power shutoff event last year. It affected some areas of the North Bay and some areas of the Sierra foothills. The closest it came to our area was parts of Calaveras and Amador counties. It also affected some of El Dorado and a little further north in that area. It was last October. The event lasted, the weather situation lasted about 12 hours or so, and then we got the all clear to go in and re-energize the power lines, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the mechanics of this as we go along. So if you, on your screen here, it talks about the criteria that would lead to a public safety power shutoff event being called.
For that event, I'm sorry for interrupting, for that event, so therefore power shut off about 12 hours.
So the weather event itself began that night. This was last October 18th, I believe. Began about 9 o'clock that night. We got the all clear that the weather situation had passed by the next morning. And so then we were able to go out and start inspecting the lines and doing everything we would need to do to re-energize the lines. So a lot of the customers were re-energized by the end of that next day. But there were some customers that were out for over 2 days. So some of the last customers that we were able to get back installed. We did also, you may have heard, have one public safety power shutoff event already this year. It was 2 weekends ago. It affected, again, part of the North Bay, Napa, Napa Lake, and Yolo counties in one pocket, and also affected some of Butte and Yuba counties in the northern part of the state. Now, that event was in total less than 24 hours. In one side, I think power was out all told for about 18 hours, and the other side was about 19 hours. So we shut off power. On the North Bay side, it was 6:30 in the morning when the weather event led to the need to shut off the power, and it was back on by that evening. And on the Northern California, the Butte, Yuba side, the power was shut off that evening about 9 p.m. and was back on by the next day at about 4 p.m. So that we have already had one event this year. If you look at this is the criteria that would go into calling an event like that. Again, as I mentioned, we have our own meteorology department, but we also work with the National Weather Service. When they call a red flag event is what they call it. We call it extreme plus conditions, where all of these conditions lead to the wildfire threat being particularly high. It's low humidity levels, high winds, high wind gusts, and dry fuel conditions on the ground. So all of this information is constantly monitored by our meteorologists and our staff out in the field, and all of this information is being fed in to make these decisions on whether or not a shutoff needs to happen. Now, a lot of these kind of conditions are going to become more prominent as we get toward the end of the fire season, the later part of the fire season, particularly the dry fuel conditions on the ground, the high winds. But as we learned a couple weekends ago, we can see these weather conditions really at any time. It was a big surprise to me to have an event happen in June while we still have snow on the mountains in the upper portions of the Sierras. But weather conditions are inherently unpredictable, and weather patterns are ever changing, and so we see these hazards more often than we've seen them in the past. So this is a map that was developed with the California Public Utilities Commission in conjunction with CAL FIRE. They mapped out the whole state based on wildfire danger. You can see the entirety of the Central Valley is Tier 1, and that's really low fire threat areas. The yellow portion of the map is Tier 2, that's elevated areas. So to give a local example, that would be a lower foothill community like, say, Sonora or Angels Camp or something along those lines. Tier 3 is the extreme fire danger areas. That is areas such as Arnold, some of the upcountry of some of our neighboring counties in the foothills, Pioneer, Pine Grove, and Amador County, Twain Hart, Miwok, if you're talking Tuolumne County. Those are considered Tier 3 extreme fire danger areas. Now, last year, when we first introduced this program, we were only going to do public safety power shutoff events in the Tier 3 areas. This year, we have expanded that to the point where we will now consider doing them in Tier 2 areas if the conditions warrant. And we've also expanded the program. Last year, it only included distribution lines. This year, we've expanded that program to also have the possibility of including transmission lines if we need to de-energize those because of the safety risk. And that's really how it could affect a community like Escalon, because even though we're in a Tier 1 fire threat area here in the Central Valley, because of the interconnected nature of the grid, it could be possible that you are connected to a transmission source that is going through a high fire threat area and would need to be de-energized if the situation called for that. So that's why we're out trying to talk to our communities, trying to prepare everybody, encourage folks to make a plan, be ready for an event where you might lose power, and that's why I appreciate your time tonight to help in that effort. So this is how we plan to do event notifications. Now, in an ideal situation, we would be able to give our customers 48 hours of notice before we turn off their power. And I should say that will not always happen because weather conditions, again, they're inherently unpredictable. Sometimes events will come up upon us faster than we anticipate. So during the event a couple weekends ago, we were not able to give the full 48 hours of notice. In some cases, I think it was 24 to 36 hours of notice. But, you know, as much as weather is unpredictable, these events are, you can predict them at least to an extent where we should always be able to give some notice to our customers and some substantial notice. You know, it won't be a matter of, you know, telling everyone that their power might go out in an hour or two or something like that. We'll plan to give as much notice as we possibly can. This outlines some of our plan to communicate with our customers. We will use text messaging, we'll use email, we'll use automated phone calls. We will also do robust media outreach. We'll use social media, Facebook, Twitter. We'll do everything we can to get that message out there. One of the things that I always emphasize when I have the opportunity like this to speak to the public about this is we want people to go on your account on the PG&E My Energy website and make sure we have your updated contact information. Our ability to contact our customers is only as good as the information they give us. So in a lot of cases, you might have a customer that, you know, when they signed up for their account, they had a landline phone that might not even exist anymore. And, you know, since then they've gotten cell phones and they have a whole different way of being contacted. And we don't know that unless they've gone on the website and updated that information. So you can go on there and indicate preferences of how you'd like to be contacted. If you prefer text messages, if you prefer email, we want to know that and we want to be able to get in contact with you when one of these events has to happen. So we plan to, again, hopefully be able to give up to 48 hours of notice, and then another notice 24 hours out from the event, and then another notice just before the electricity is being turned off. Now, what might happen too in some cases is we might be giving notice 48 hours before the event, and then as the event gets closer, maybe the scope of the affected area will shrink. So some of the people that got notified early on might not actually end up being shut off, but we want to be able to update those customers as we go along. You know, again, realizing the situation is constantly changing with weather. And then we want to also be able to do our best to keep our customers informed during the shutoff, as we're making progress restoring power, and then once power is restored. We also want to work with our city and county agency emergency response partners. So again, that's why I appreciate you guys having me here tonight. So I want to be able to contact your city manager ahead of an event like this so that you guys can make your plans as a city to be able to be as prepared for this as you can. We've worked extensively with county OES. We're trying to work with all of our cities and counties to make this plan as we go. Question?
Yeah, actually, what I was wondering about, can the city have a copy of this?
We have it.
You have it?
Mhm.
Okay, and is a copy that being spread also via Facebook? I'm also thinking of chamber Facebook pages, websites, just to get the word out as much as we can. I see March here tonight. I know it's going to be in the Escalon Times, but it's great. So that's, to me, the big thing, just getting the word out on this.
And we appreciate that. So I appreciate any help. We'd love to have any help from our city partners and agency partners to get the word out, like you said.
Okay.
I got a question for you, Dylan.
Yeah.
In this case where the power is all shut off from transmission lines or whatever situation might be, first of all, do we know currently where we're getting our power from? Do we know that today?
Yeah, so there are, for a city the size of Escalon, there will be several sources of power that come in to feed different parts of the town. I have a map portal that I can share with the city staff. We're limited in what we can share publicly about where this infrastructure is for security reasons, but certainly something I could share with the city. We have planning maps that show where the city is connected to. what might be higher fire threat areas for planning purposes. And then before an event, we'll have maps specific to the event that we can share. But now in a town like this, you're going to have several different sources of transmission. It could be possible that multiple transmission sources are affected in one event, or it could be possible that a part of the town is affected and another part of the town is not affected.
Because the MID is here as well.
Right, and so MID, so that's a good question. MID has indicated, my counterpart from MID has indicated to us that they think it's very unlikely that a PG&E public safety power shutoff outage would affect them. They have a lot of their own infrastructure that they're able to be up and running without us. They do have some transmission that's tied in with PG&E's system, but they feel like they'll be able to compensate for that. I'm careful not to speak for them, but this is what I've had indicated to me, is that they think that it's unlikely it would affect them.
Next question, solar. With all the solar input we currently have in this valley, if the power lines were to go down, what prevents those solar lines or solar energy or whatever sources of solar we have from going back into the transmission line?
Right, so there should be, solar installations have a two-way meter on them that should lock that out. Because yes, obviously that would defeat the purpose of.
So what you're saying is in a situation where the transmission line goes down, these meters trigger a shut-off?
That's how they're designed, right?
I thought they were designed to take the power back into the system.
You mean into the system as in the grid, the power grid?
That's correct.
No, they're supposed to not feed into the grid in a situation like this.
So how does PG&E keep account of the solar that's being generated for the customer? And where does that energy go if it's not going back into the grid because they're not using it with their own, where it's being produced?
So there won't be any ability to feed it into the grid, so that would be lost production for a solar customer.
So when you guys haven't shut down transmission lines, it does feed back to the grid, right?
Say that again?
So when you haven't shut down, when there's not a shutdown of power,
oh, right,
it feeds back.
Operating under normal, right.
Normal conditions, it does feed back
That's
into the grid.
Right.
But once you guys shut it down, it enacts where it stops it from being able to.
In theory,
Correct.
that's a mechanism designed, safety designed not to kill anybody meanwhile, while they're working on the lines.
Correct, yes, to keep the lines clear
What
until.
about generators that feed back into the system?
So that's another very good point, and this, people hearing about this has led to more interest in installing generators. So we have a page on our website, pge.com/generator, that talks about the proper installation of a generator. If you buy a generator for your house, you need to have it installed by a professional electrician, and it should also have that two-way switch on it where it won't feed back into the lines. Yes, exactly. So that's a very good point, and I'm glad you raised it, because we want to make sure that any generators out there are safe and that they're not feeding back into our lines at a time when we have, deemed it necessary to shut off the
Inverter
lines.
is actually a switch that turns off the power so it can't go back. And that's what people have to understand. So if they're crazy enough not to have an inverter, they need to turn off the main breaker.
Right, it sounds like you have some knowledge of.
A little bit.
Yes, electricity. So that I appreciate that.
I think it's something that most people may not recognize, shouldn't be brought up to them, that at the very least turn off the main breaker if you're going to do anything.
Right, okay. Good point. So I'm going to talk a little bit about restoration. So again, after the weather event has passed, the winds have died down, humidity's rising, then we will get the all clear, like all systems go signal. And at that point, we can go out and begin patrolling and inspecting the lines and being ready to re-energize the lines. So what we need to do is we will actually need to go out and look at every inch of the grid that has been shut down. So when you shut down the grid, you take away a lot of the eyes and the ears of the grid. The stuff that is out there, making sure the grid operates safely at all times. When you disable it wholesale, you disable a lot of those things. So that's why the need to patrol everything, actually, look at every square inch of it. We will, if we find damage, obviously we have to repair that damage before we can re-energize that portion of the grid. We say, because extreme weather can last several hours or days, for planning purposes, we suggest customers prepare for outages longer than 48 hours. Now, this, again, I want to emphasize, this is a highly unpredictable kind of situation. So every event is going to be a little different in terms of how long the weather event's going to last, how long it's going to take to restore after the event. So one of the things for a community like this that is tier 1, that can only be affected through transmission. It's likely that transmission lines will not be out for the entire duration of an event because that'll be the first thing that needs to come back up in order to get the grid back up and running. So we do a process called step restoration where we go out and inspect all these lines. So priority will be given to the higher voltage transmission lines, and then they in turn feed the distribution system. So again, we go out, isolate, repair damage. We're working up in the mountains where these areas might be more affected to install as many devices as we can so that we can do what we call segmenting of the lines so that we can bring it back in steps so that not everybody has to be out until the end of the inspections and patrols. And then once it's safe to restore, we will restore as quickly as we can and then notify customers when the power has been restored. So this is a lot of the steps that we're taking to work with our customers to have them be prepared for this. We have reached out to all of our customers, all of our electric customers have been sent letters. I'm sure many of you and many folks in the room received the letters. We are doing everything we can to conduct outreach in forums like this. We are partnering with the Public Utilities Commission and the other two investor-owned utilities, Southern California Edison and San Diego Gas and Electric, to do an ad campaign. There's a website that's been launched that's called prepareforpowerdown.com. Has a lot of tips as far as preparedness. We have a marketing campaign. You may have heard some of our ads on the radio. So we're trying to do everything we can to get this information out there. I talked already before about updating contact information. That's something else we're trying to emphasize. We sent out 5 million postcards asking customers to do that. We have a plan to hold 23 answer centers and open houses. A lot of them have already taken place. Some will happen over the next several weeks and months. Another thing I want to emphasize on this page is medical baseline. PG&E has a program called Medical Baseline, which will give a bill discount to customers that have medical needs that require electricity. If they have a doctor sign off on the fact that they have something like a CPAP machine, an oxygen machine, something that requires electricity for them to have life safety, they can get a discount on their bill. That also gives us a good list of people that we know are out there that are our customers that have these medical needs. We will do extra outreach to make sure they are notified. We do live calls to them, and we'll, even if we need to, we'll actually dispatch people to go door to door. We did this in the event 2 weekends ago, the known medical baseline customers. The ones that we were not able to reach by phone, they all got a door knock. This list is something that we can share with our city emergency partners. If they agree to sign a non-disclosure agreement, we can share it in concordance with HIPAA laws and all of that kind of thing. So that's something that I'll work with your staff on as well, so that we can kind of share information on who are the medically vulnerable customers out there. This is contact information for myself, and also, more importantly, contact information for wildfire safety program in general. You can see up there's a phone number, 1-866-743-6589. There's also a dedicated website that talks about wildfire safety, and an email address if customers prefer to email in their questions as opposed to call. I would encourage you to take advantage of these resources. Get all the information that you can, be as prepared as you can. We want, again, I'll emphasize, we want to do everything we can to help our customers prepare for a situation where they might be out of power. So that concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Are there any final questions?
Yeah, why
for Dylan?
now instead of before? Why are we now doing these programs today instead of we doing them in the past? Why didn't we do them in the past?
I can't speak for the past. I mean, we can only look forward from here. San Diego Gas and Electric has done the program for years. They were ahead of us on doing it. We only started it up last year. And yeah, I mean, one could argue that it should have been done in the past, but only go forward from here.
Okay, I'm just curious if it was motivated by the burning down of a town or whatever.
Clearly the wildfire threat in our state has continued to grow and looks to only continue to grow in the future. So, more and more safety measures are very prudent.
You said underground was very expensive. Obviously, we know that. My question is, where you have these poles and these trees and all the brush and issue, why couldn't you lay the conduit like you do gas lines or fuel lines on the ground and put it in a conduit that was able to resistant of the elements?
Well, all of that becomes expensive. I mean, the power lines have to be buried in the ground. In order to do that, you have to oftentimes remove trees, remove roots, clear a path for the lines to go.
But I'm talking about surface mounting.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, regulations are such that you can't have the lines, sitting above
Exposed?
ground. Yeah, right. I mean, I should say, I'm not an engineer, but that's
I'm just curious
my
because
understanding of it.
it seems to make sense that if the conduit was there, the trees aren't gonna fall on it, and the fires aren't gonna start because you don't have anything to fall on to start the fire. And then cost is an issue, but so is litigation.
There's costs and trade-offs with all of these. Absolutely. I mean, that's, it all needs to be explored, yeah.
Yeah, I had like the exact same question. Why now? Why all these new, policies and procedures now as opposed to, 10, 20, 30 years ago or whatever? I mean, it's always been hot in the summer. There's always been fires. So I just want to clarify that I understand this is so PG&E can as a preventative measure, shut power to a certain area that's at high risk for a fire to break out, right?
Correct, yes.
So it's clearly a result of the campfire, right? And the bankruptcy and everything
Well,
that's
I mean,
happened.
it's a result of a lot of fires and the growing fire threat to our state.
Okay, now my other question was, isn't PG&E going through a bankruptcy right now?
Yes.
Are they going to pass all the costs of that on to the customers?
Yeah, well, the Public Utilities Commission is the one that decides who has to pay for what between shareholders, ratepayers. So a lot of this safety work will be put into the rate base. Some of it will be paid for by shareholders. That's ultimately something that we go before the Utilities Commission on in all of these cases.
Okay, so rates are going up. All right.
I can't predict the future, but
And then my last question was the chances of Escalon being in a tier 1 zone and all this stuff. And like you said, we don't know where the power is coming from, but the chances of this affecting Escalon and the community are probably very slim. Is that correct?
I would hesitate to characterize it in that way. Because of the interconnected nature of the grid, it is possible that a community like Escalon could be affected. How likely is it? I think we'll know a lot more as we go through a fire season and see how often we actually have to de-energize transmission level power in a case like this. Again, we've had the program for 1 year. We had one event last year. So far this year, we've already had one event. So I think, I'd love to give you a more definitive answer, but frankly, I really can't because so much of this is just so
Probably the best thing just to be prepared.
And again, that's what we want to emphasize, right?
Will you be available in the foyer for a few minutes, just in case any audience members have questions?
Sure, I can be.
Is that okay?
Certainly,
Is that okay?
Well, I have a question.
A general question?
Yeah, I
Or-
have two general questions.
Okay, I'm just watching the time because I know we have a lot to do tonight,
Real
so.
quick.
Okay.
When you turn the power back on and you blow somebody's refrigerator or TV set out, are you guys have a fund for that?
Okay, so I'll speak in general terms. If somebody experiences a loss as a result of our equipment, such as you mentioned, power surges or something like that, then that is something that PG&E would be responsible for paying claims on. That's not something we've seen in either of these events because we take great measures to make sure the power comes back on in the proper way.
Too, to file a claim?
The claims website can be found on the website. I believe, don't quote me on this 100%, I believe it's pge.com/claims, but it's something very simple like that that can be found on the website.
My second and last question is, you're shut down for 12 hours, your freezer thaws, you ruin, $200 worth of meat. You guys pay for that too?
No, so the way our claims process works is if something was caused by the fault of PG&E's employees or equipment or something like that, we're liable to pay claims on that. If something is caused by something outside of our control, weather, winter storms, wind events, then we don't pay claims on that. If this public safety power shutoff is considered something that is, a natural phenomenon, we shut off the power because it has to be done. So no, there will not be claims reimbursements on that.
Kirk, those are actually pretty good questions. Sean, what you got?
So, I'm not speaking for PG&E, but I think I can speak for Peter and Ed. And in my opinion, as a PG&E holder, Dylan, don't take offense, PG&E is trying to do this to save their butts. Yeah. But that's not my comment. My comment is, and Dylan, maybe this is a true suggestion, maybe you can run it up the flagpole. Why doesn't PG&E do forward thinking on this? In the Central Valley, there's how many customers? How many do you think?
Hundreds of thousands.
So let's say there's
a couple million.
150,000 households that could possibly be affected by this. PG&E could go to a battery backup supplier and say, we have 150,000 customers. Can you give us a discounted rate that the homeowners have a battery backup that if PG&E has to kill the power will still run out of the battery backup. And for those of us that have solar, our solar can be fed through the battery backup. Because otherwise what happens is you're gonna have 150,000 potential PO people that PG&E is just arbitrarily cutting their power. If PG&E works with their customers and says, we can get 150,000 battery backups, it's a win-win. PG&E gets what they want, the homeowners get.
So I think that what you're saying is it's a good suggestion. I think as we go forward with this, as we have more and more of this need for public safety power shutoffs, and as smart grid technology continues to evolve and become more affordable to the average customer, I think you could see some things like that where people are able to, detach themselves from the grid, have that backup kind of ability where they can still run if the grid shuts down. I think that technology is improving rapidly. It's not quite at a point yet where it's affordable for most people, but I think, the technology is moving in that
Or
direction.
even just a rebate to get it started. I mean, PG&E says, I'll give you $1,000 back for a $5,000 rebate. I see a lot of people jumping on board to avoid problems like this.
I mean, I can't promise you that, but I think, those kinds of things are thoughts that we will certainly entertain going forward.
Did a great job.
I have one quick question, is now we're going out, you are now going into my income, because now my husband can't work because he needs electricity. I work 2 jobs. There's both jobs. I can't work without electricity. And then now we have to spend more money because now we have a loss of food that's rotting in the refrigerator. Now you've got other people here that we're worried about looting because now companies and places are not going to be open. That's just my concern because now this is not only going to be out of power, which is going to be bad enough, but now you're cutting into my income and my ability to pay my bills a month because we're the typical family, we live paycheck to paycheck. And any kind of inconvenience is going to be a major hardship.
So your concerns are very well understood. Shutting down power is not a decision that's taken lightly.
Is there any other way you guys can handle this problem without shutting off electricity?
Well, we feel like this has to be a part of the solution going forward. Again, it's not something we take lightly. It's not something we enjoy doing. We have 23,000 employees whose sole focus is usually keeping power on. So an instance where we have to turn the power off is not something that we enjoy, but it is something that we have to consider as a possibility given all of the public safety threats that we face. We also realize that there are public safety detriments to shutting off power. So it is a balance that has to be struck. There's a public safety risk on either side of it, and it's not a decision that we take lightly. It's something that there's a lot of weighing of those factors that goes into these decisions.
Obviously, we're not happy about it, but it's just now PG&E problem is now becoming into my world and now being my problem.
Well, understood, and I mean, the wildfire threat in our state is a problem that we all face.
Dylan, I appreciate you coming tonight. I have a feeling you're probably getting the same sentiment from everywhere you go, so.
I've had a lot of opportunities to speak with our communities, and I appreciate you guys having me here tonight, yes.
All right, thanks a
Great
lot.
job.
Thank you.
Dave-
Good
Dave-
job.
Dave, you have one real quick.
I was reading an article here, it was from the New York Times, published in the Wall Street Journal. Apparently the Russians hacked into our power grid. Now, if they can hack into it and shut it off, can they hack into it and turn it back on during one of these crises? Or turn it
So
off?
I think that's a great question. Cybersecurity is a huge threat to the power grid. It's something PG&E has a cybersecurity operations center in Concord. It's something that keeps a lot of us up at night. The idea of somebody hacking into the power grid and doing mass wholesale shutdowns, and like you said, turning it back on. All I can say is, that threat is real, and we do realize it. We are prepared for it. We have a state-of-the-art defense for that to try to make sure something like that doesn't happen. But, without trying to alarm anybody, I think that threat is something that's very much out there.
Generator sales are probably going to go up. I should buy stock.
I'd love for them all to move out here, but.
Dylan, I appreciate you coming
Thank you.
tonight.
Thanks
If
for
anybody
having
has any questions, just meet up with Dylan in the foyer, and thank you very much for the presentation. Consent calendar. These items are considered routine in nature and are acted upon by a single action unless requested by an individual, council member, or member of the public for special consideration. What is everybody's pleasure?
Move to approve.
Second.
The move to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Consent calendar passes 5-0. Staff communications.
So, Mayor and Council, before you tonight are our monthly reports, including the Treasurer's Report, Police Department activity, Animal Control activity, Recreation Department, Water Department update, Development Services update, your building report for May, and Public Works update, wastewater treatment plant update for May, and then an E-Trans system update for May also. Staff is available for any questions that you might have on those items.
Council, do you have any questions on any specific item? Okay, do you have anything else, Tammy, then?
One note one question for the council would be the meeting on July 1st, because it's typically close to the 4th of July holiday. We typically go dark as long as there are no pressing items. Is the council okay not holding that meeting on July 1st?
Dark is good.
For me.
Dark is good?
Yeah.
She had a question on something.
You know what, I may have.
On the wastewater. Can I ask it now or later?
Item 4, did we get that already go by? Damn.
I think, yeah, consensus is, yeah,
Okay.
unless there's anything pressing that comes
Of
up.
course, right.
And getting back to Peter, you had a
Yeah, I just, the wastewater treatment plant update study, what's the update on that?
On the study itself, I actually talked with Andy with PACE today. We're going to get some data information to him, and going to potentially hold our kickoff meeting on July 3rd.
Tammy, I let this slip by number 4. I'd like to revisit number 4.
4.
Yeah, regarding the,
The master encroachment,
this is well, no, that's not, that's not.
Are you going back to consent?
he's going to the consent
No,
calendar.
no, I think this, I was looking for the one about the downtown district,
That's number 5, the Rule 20A work.
where we're gonna have a district down there.
So, we received, I received an email
That's
from
what it
PG&E that because we haven't used our Rule 20A, which is for undergrounding, power lines, in the last 8 years, they are looking at allocating a portion of our funds to others that would like to use it. One way that we could get around from losing that was adopting an undergrounding district boundaries. So this is the first step in doing that, to hold our public hearing notice and do it. And we focused it on the downtown where we had talked about
saw the diagram of
First
it.
Street and those. So that's basically what that is.
But you cut off a portion of the trailer place, did you notice that? Like the backyard of the trailer wasn't quite all that lot, and that's part of the same lot? Why is that?
At this point, we're just trying to lock in First Street and then catching a block on each side.
it's a sketch.
It's more of a sketch than an actual
Okay, let's go a
moment.
little
And then when we
past
get
that.
closer to the project moving forward, we'll have
Got
a
it.
better idea
My
what
next-
vicinity we're covering,
Got
and we
it.
can adjust or amend it as needed.
My next question, you're doing this to save these funds that will escape us if we don't create this district. My question, what's the impact of this district on the financial of this town? I mean, what's it gonna cost us to create this district?
It's not gonna cost us much to create it. Once we go to implement it is when the cost is going to become.
And what's
So,
that
so
gonna be?
identifying the district that you want to, do undergrounding in is not where the cost is. It's when you go to try to implement that.
Okay, and my question is, by creating this district, what rights do we currently possess that we will no longer possess if this district's created? And I'm not referring to you and I, I'm referring to property owners in that district. And the other question is, by creating this district, are there fees attached to their properties because of the new district?
Not at this time, no.
At this time. Would they create a problem down the line possibly? Would there be fees there? And if so, what for?
If we move forward with the undergrounding, then there could be potential costs to property owners for upgrading of electricity or their electrical work, that kind of cost.
Would there be those costs if this district wasn't there?
If you move forward with it would only be if you moving forward with the undergrounding, then yes, it could still be there.
Could be there, but it would definitely be there if you had the district.
Again, only if you move forward with implementation of the underground.
I don't think you understand my question. My question is,
Yeah.
two different scenarios. First scenario is that we have no district, but if they're gonna do undergrounding, is there gonna be a fee increase? And the answer is, of course, yes, because you have to pay for that process. Yes?
It depends upon where we get the monies and what the costs are, so I can't really answer that question. But this doesn't lock us into doing this.
What I'm getting at is, we're creating this district. I just want to know if it's another situation where we're creating a district that there's going to be fees and higher taxes and that sort of thing attached to it.
It's not like a landscape district. That's not what this is.
I want to be clear on it, because if we do create a district, I don't want people climbing down my throat saying, what the hell happened?
It's we're identifying an area that the city desires to move to underground.
And I appreciate that.
Power.
I just want to be clear on it, that it was not another situation where we're creating a district with a lot of fees and stuff like that, change property values, property rights, none of that's going to happen. That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Any other staff communications?
Yes, go ahead, Chief.
Just to let council know, I will be out of the office probably for 6 to 8 weeks. I am having surgery again on the foot on July 20th.
Yes.
Or June 20th, this Thursday. So.
You'll miss Park Feet.
Good possibility.
We'll bring you on the hospital bed.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I want to let you know.
I appreciate it. Anything else before we go on to item 7? Item 7, RTD contract. I have a feeling John, this is your category.
This is. Top of the evening, Mayor and Council. John Ando, Transit Coordinator. Today I'm here to discuss with you the E-Trans service contract that we have with San Joaquin Regional Transit District. As you recall, we were before Council to discuss. RTD gave us a proposal that they want to increase their rates by approximately 15% to add an overhead fee. That would cover some of their administrative costs to oversee the E-Trans contract. The council directed us to go back to negotiate with RTD to discuss that rate. We did do that. The city manager was actively participating with that. And basically, we concluded from that meeting that RTD wants to hold on to that additional 15% increase to the city. So we mentioned to them that we'll come back before council to discuss options on what we can do to continue to operate the E-Trans system. One thing to note, which is of concern, which is why we're bringing this to council's attention, is that originally when we entered into amendment number 6 with San Joaquin RTD, the intent was that we were going to, as directed by council and the short-range transit plan was adopted, we were going to implement Hopper Route 95, which was going to transition our Route 1 service to Modesto over to RTD, and then we were going to pay a contribution to RTD to operate that service. Therefore, we would just only have a demand response service within the city limits. At the same time, City of Ripon was negotiating their agreement since they approved a new contract with National Express. And they were able to negotiate a 5-year agreement, which therefore they're not being impacted by this overhead charge at the City of Escalon. Later on in this fiscal year, RTD opted to not pursue Hopper Route 95 because of the LTF issue that is ongoing and potential deficits with them operating the current intercity system as it stands. So as a result, we ended up doing a 1-year agreement. So in essence, it appears that we could be potentially disenfranchised because had we entered into a 5-year agreement the same time Ripon had entered into a 5-year agreement, we wouldn't be before council having this discussion right now. So that's where the disagreement occurs. Some of the options that we are considering that we would like the council to consider is, one, we could continue with RTD and pay the higher rates. So our rate will go from $55 to $59 effective July 1.
Where will that money come from, may I ask?
It'll come from LTF and FTA. 2, we can have the mayor talk with the chair of the RTD Board of Directors and maybe schedule a meeting and see if we can have a discussion at a higher level than staff. 3, we can negotiate with RTD, should they be interested, to use their VanGo contract, which has a lower hourly rate of $37.37 per hour, plus a portion of those fixed costs, plus whatever fee that RTD adds on top of that. We could discontinue E-Trans and purchase VanGo from RTD and negotiate what that service could cost. We could release a separate request for proposals with a simple scope of services. I've had conversations with 3 vendors that potentially would bid on that service. We could partner with City of Modesto, as they've expressed that they're interested in operating the service. And lastly, we could partner with City of Manteca. We did get an email from their city manager that they would consider assessing the situation and consider something around the September timeframe. Is that correct?
Correct.
September timeframe, which Manteca does have much more favorable rates with their contract than what we're paying with RTD.
Same provider.
Same provider, National Express.
A lot of options. How does VanGo work with Escalon? Do you think it's a pretty good fit?
VanGo could work. Basically, VanGo is a countywide service. It operates in a series of zones. So there's 4 zones: the Lodi zone, Stockton zone, Tracy zone, and Manteca zone. Escalon is within the Manteca zone. It is $4 to ride. A user could simply call to request a trip, or they can use an app to dispatch the trip, and they would dispatch a vehicle. They do provide trips within the zone, and then if you want to go beyond the zone to like Tracy, Stockton, Lodi, you have to make transfers at these various transfer points to another VanGo service and pay another fee. But hypothetically, if we were to just to suspend or discontinue E-Trans, we can, in theory, just have Escalon riders use the VanGo service during the VanGo service hours.
Would they go to Modesto?
They would not go to Modesto. So we would have to have some type of service that will still connect people to Modesto.
Okay.
Just strikes me that there's an inherent conflict between us and RTD over these LTF funds, and we're always going to be at odds with them over that. So I like the idea of talking with Manteca or Modesto Transit Systems and see what the options are with them.
So we do have representatives here tonight too from RTD. If you guys had questions for them, Gloria is here.
Oh, Gloria's
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Good evening. My first time to address the Board of Escalon, the City Council of Escalon, I apologize. I'm Gloria Salazar, Deputy CEO of San Joaquin Regional Transit District. I'm joined by our Chief Operating Officer, Jean Foleta Morales. It's a pleasure to address the Board regarding the proposed contract with Escalon. There are just some elements of the staff report that we believe we should address or that need clarification. We are especially concerned with the statement that the RTD refused to provide greater detail about our overhead justification for the 10%. We had a discussion with the CEO, Donna DiMartino, and I had a discussion with your transit coordinator, John Ando, and we also had a telephone conference with Tammy. I wanted to be certain that to be on hand tonight to answer any outstanding questions to provide or additional clarification. First, we want to let you know that we will respect whatever decision you make tonight. We give our commitment of cooperation with the transition if you so decide. As some of you are aware, or all of you are aware, the entire county is faced with transit funding challenges. This is the reason why RTD had to revisit our costing model. We could not afford to run service at a deficit, but our rates need to be reasonable. The proposed contract with you is reasonable because we are not charging you the true cost of providing the service. Your contract represents 2.6% of our contract with Next, that's the National Express. The right business decision is to charge you 2.6% of Next fixed cost that would bring your cost per hour to 86.71. And by the way, this rate is very close to the recent contract that Sacramento RTD entered with the city of Elk Grove. A 10% overhead mark is reasonable to cover RTD staff time associated with our contract with you. We are not charging you 10% of the entire overhead cost of RTD. We're charging you 10% based on your contract, which if we convert into dollars, it represents approximately $9,900 a year. We want our rates to be competitive and reasonable. Our contract with Ripon okay, will be revisited to reflect the same cost methodology. Our short-range transit plan, which was developed by your transit coordinator, the short-range transit plan of RTD, has plans and assumptions. Obviously, if funding is available, all the services contained in that plan will be implemented. We're still working on ways of providing intercity services to include Escalon, Modesto, and Manteca as they relate to funding. Without additional funding, we need to make strategic business decisions on what services we should provide within our means. We at RTD have valued our long-standing partnership, that's with the city of Escalon, and we're eager to continue our partnership. If the city decides to use another party to provide services, we are willing to continue on a month-to-month basis in the interim and do everything possible to make transition as smooth as possible. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, especially on the month-to-month. And I think that this sounds like it's just going to come down to a good old-fashioned business decision, and I get it. We're out here. The costs are going to go up per trip. Have you had an opportunity to talk to the people who typically will be riding E-Trans right now to see what model best fits us?
Last time I've talked with the riders, they do like a dial-a-ride, door-to-door type of service.
Okay.
So that type of a service model will continue to work well for the city. With the retooling of Route 1, they've gotten accustomed to some type of a deviated connection to Modesto. It doesn't preclude us from, in a future service design, just making the whole thing like a demand response, per se, eliminating like a route concept, and then having people just go point to point to specific destinations.
And you're looking for input from us tonight to hopefully narrow down some of these choices that you just gave us,
That
right?
is correct, to see how does the council feel about these options. We have the funding if we have to pay the higher rates. It is more of a principle thing as it relates to, as Ms. Salazar stated, they are going to talk to Ripon, but in theory, they do have a 5-year contract, so what if Ripon says, no, we don't want to pay? Do this RTD plan to exercise their right to terminate? Those are questions we just don't know.
Yeah. I would just think, to me, I think that the best overall fit based on the input that you get from the people who are actively using the system will hopefully guide us in a direction as to which way. And now, granted, economics are a big important part too.
Right.
So the best overall, most economical fit.
Having a separate system, if we relied like solely on Van Gogh, it's going to increase the cost of our predominantly ridership base from basically paying 75 cents to $4.
So maybe that's
which
becoming not as attractive.
that won't be attractive to our ridership group. People may still utilize the system, but it would also expand their opportunities to go further than Escalon, because now they have a greater access to destinations in Manteca or destinations in Stockton, which presently they don't really have.
You listed a number of options. Are any of those options similar to like a dial-a-ride that do not include RTD?
Yes, so if we did a partnership with Modesto, they anticipate they would use their max mobility contractor, which is basically operating their dial-a-ride service within their city limits. If we were to use Manteca's contract, basically they operate a fixed route and a dial-a-ride, so we would just use a bucket of hours that is allowed within their contract. Their rates are significantly lower than what we would be paying to RTD.
But it sounds like in either option, we would need to keep the options open to have service to Modesto and to Manteca. It sounds like that's where a lot of the riders are heading into one town or another. Is there any additional input at this time?
I'm just curious, what is your bottom line? What is your recommendation?
Well, in light of the response we got from Manteca, I would say we should pursue and see if we can work out some type of a partnership with Manteca, since they are our city to our west, and they do have favorable rates. If we are not successful with that, see if we can talk with RTD about the Van Gogh concept, since the Van Gogh contract is lower than utilizing the National Express contract that they have with the intercity system. And see if that's an option. And if those don't work, then consider either talking to Modesto or going out to bid.
Okay, all right, very good. And it's just a matter of economics on both ends, and so
Certainly.
I'm sure we'll be talking again.
Is RTD open to working about the Van Gogh concept?
The Van Gogh is, it's a short service, provided you're paying for it, it's short service.
Right.
But keep in mind that the $37 that you quoted earlier is only variable cost. We're
That's
going
only
to follow
variable,
the
that's
same
correct.
methodology
Yes,
for that.
that's correct.
We can talk. Thank you.
So RTD is willing to have that conversation?
Oh, absolutely,
Okay,
absolutely.
and we would
Your
work,
service.
we would work through you?
Certainly.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you.
All right.
Are we okay for this one?
I think we're good.
Okay.
We got direction. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, John. Matters presented from the audience. At this time, the public may address the city council on any item not on the agenda. That is not on the agenda, that is within the authority of the council. The speaker is limited to a maximum of 5 minutes. Try to really keep it to that tonight. It's going to be a long night as it is. Who would like to speak their mind?
Russell Fowler, Assembly Member Heath Floor's office. I know there's been a lot of trying to get me to do the Miss Escalon contest. I won't be participating. I'm very sorry. It looks like you guys got some good candidates who will represent your community well.
It's a great contest.
Yeah, no.
Great candidates, great
sorry,
contest.
Sorry, I can't make it. But on a serious note, apologize. A little under the weather, but wanted to be out here to make this. My compliments to city staff for putting on such a great budget presentation earlier at 6. Very informative for myself as well. They gave a great overview of what the city is facing, some of the positives, some of the things we can work on together. So appreciate all the work that city staff did there. And also wanted to say I had heard earlier in the week that unfortunately Escalon PD deputies had to draw their weapons earlier this week. Obviously that's something that no officer wants to do, but they acted very courageous in the situation and did a great job for the community. So our hats off to them as well, and your department there, Chief. And on the 15th, we will be hopefully getting a state budget. So I'll have a little bit more to bring back to you, and we're working very hard. So
Very good.
with that being said, are there any comments, questions for me?
When did you say we're gonna be able to explore the idea we had? Is it?
It's gonna have to be next session. So.
When's next session?
So I believe next session starts, trying to backtrack here, it feels like it's been forever. I think we go into October next year. I think. I'll follow.
Yeah.
No, next.
Of 20?
I'll follow up with you in an email. I'll follow up with you in an email.
Probably means this year.
It's this year, yeah.
Gotta be.
But I'll get you a for sure thing in an email.
I'd like to hear how it goes and what you guys are gonna propose on the idea we had.
Yeah, we'll sit down before it happens and we'll
Yeah, I'd like to see
really
it formulated.
hammer it out. But we'll make sure you're in the loop,
Thank you.
everything like that. So, any other comments, questions?
No, if you feel bad about making the Miss Escalon contest, you can make it up by ensuring that you and the assembly member will be able to make the senior Mr. and Miss Escalon luncheon.
Well, if somebody would email me the details, I'll be glad to be there. Be happy
Well, that's
to.
fantastic.
You got it?
I'm sure it's going to happen.
I
pretty
can't.
soon.
Heath's daughter has swimming meets on the weekends, so he's a dad on the weekends. So
This
not
is
sure to be able to make
Tuesday.
that.
It's okay, it's Tuesday lunch.
Oh, Tuesday lunch. Well,
I have a feeling.
I'll tell him I tried.
Feeling you're going to get an email right away. If you probably have already received an email.
no, I'm all clear.
Oh,
Believe me, it would be at the top of my list.
Okay. Don't say anything disparaging because the chairman's in the audience. Okay, so yeah.
No, I'm looking forward to
Better
it.
warn you. It's a great luncheon as well.
Yeah,
It is
no,
a
look forward
fantastic
to it.
luncheon.
And
We'd love to have you and the assembly member.
that'd be great. And if you don't mind, I'm probably going to take off because I am feeling a little bit under the weather. So
Take care of
I'll
yourself.
check in with Tammy and see what happened.
All right.
Thanks,
Take care of
guys.
yourself.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Bye, Russell.
Anybody else like to come up and speak their mind?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chuck Wynn, County Supervisor. It's nights like this that I miss City Council. City Council is really where the rubber meets the road, dealing with real issues with real people in real time. And so I've enjoyed listening to your discussions. Sorry I didn't make your budget hearing earlier. A couple of reasons I'm here. One is that unfortunately your Tuesday celebration is the same day as our board meeting, and this month we're doing our budget over 2 days. So I brought our certificate for Doug and Diane as senior Mr. and Mrs. Escalon. So I'll give
I
it to
may
you.
want to give it to the lady in charge right now, Gracie Marks.
And I've never been able to make one because it's always in conflict. So, but anyway, The other reason is, as Peter was at LAFCO, did a great job for Escalon and his meeting, an interesting discussion in regards to MSR. In regards to the discussion about PG&E, one of the things that I would have to at least include in this issue in regards to wildfires is I was at a conference in Spokane, Washington a couple of weeks ago, and it was really the western United States from North Dakota to Texas all the way to the West Coast. And obviously being in Washington, there's a lot of Washingtonians and Oregons and all these other, Northwest country or counties. But forest management was a big issue, huge issue. And when I was back in D.C. A couple weeks before that, that was another huge issue because forest management in a lot of people's minds has been really the cause for these. I mean, I'm not trying to excuse PG&E. What I'm saying is that even the chief of CAL FIRE talked about forest fires are no longer like they used to be. They're more like brush fires because the growth between the trees has become so enormous that the fire just goes through, and that's why it's more hazardous for firefighters, et cetera. So that's another issue which, fortunately, a discussion from the Undersecretary of Interior, the Federal Department of Interior, they are doing a much better job in forest management, certainly in our forests, and that's really a great benefit to all of us, especially this. One of the things that tomorrow I have a meeting with all the department heads. The county kicked off a Clean San Joaquin program because we have a whole host of issues which trash our county, actually our state. And one of the issues which probably is inherent to all of us is the illegal dumping. A bigger issue probably, and I don't know how big it is in Escalon or the area around Escalon, is homelessness, homeless encampments, which is a huge problem in my district, especially after McCollum, et cetera. And we're trying to address it, and what we found is we don't have enough resources. The county doesn't have enough departments, enough resources to clean these up. I'm sure Escalon's facing with the chief. I'm sure you're having similar problems. Although I know Ripon only has 7 homeless, so that's not a major issue. But the reason I bring that up is because one of the things we're trying to do collectively with all the cities and the county is we're trying to incrementally address the homeless problem. And as you address it, we had a meeting with the Stockton City Council, a joint meeting between the board on homelessness, and that whole meeting was towards the services and how we can help them, et cetera. But there's another side, certainly in my district, and I think the other district experienced the same thing, is 4 years ago, the calls were, how can we help, et cetera, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't deny that. However, the calls, probably 40% of the complaint calls I get in my office are, how do we get rid of them? They're in our neighborhood, they're in our downtown area, et cetera, and how do we deal with that? And I've looked at Orange County and LA County in regards to their litigation and some of the things they're trying to do, and they've been successful in some, but certainly not in others. So the reason I bring this up is because what we're trying to do with the cities, all 7 cities in the county, is trying to develop a series of ordinances which are uniform throughout the county, as opposed to the cities having one, the county having another. Because what happens, and what's happened over the past few years, is that homeless will go to places that they find the easiest targets, the least amount of enforcement, the most service, et cetera. Lodi is in my district, and Lodi, oftentimes, the Lodi City Council gets a complaint that they're too generous in regards to their service, et cetera. So what we're trying to do is we're trying, by joining together, if we get sued like Manteca did a few years back, you remember that, if we get sued, which will probably happen because anytime you try to enforce something with the homeless, you get sued, but at least we can establish a uniform ordinance for the district attorney's office, for county council, city attorneys, so that we can band together because we're all fighting for the same issue, as opposed to being picked off, from the larger groups that will take you on. So we're trying to do that. I just introduced that, and we'll be having more to discuss in the future. The other issue in regards to the homelessness, which is manifest, is the mental health issue. It's major, and one of the things we're talking about in regards to the mental health is that we don't have, in fact, I think, as I read somewhere along the way, you just had an issue with a gentleman who voluntarily committed himself in regards to a domestic situation. And the reason I bring that up is because without that voluntary commitment, you can't do anything about it. You can do the 72-hour hold, et cetera. But so and even the mayor, London Breed in San Francisco, 10 to 1, they passed an ordinance to be more aggressive in regards to using the guardianship or conservatorship in regards to committing some of these individuals. So the reason I bring all that up is because as we move forward, it's much better we move together collectively as government bodies, because that's greater protection and certainly greater uniformity. And hopefully, and there's other things I can talk about another time in regards to how we can do a better job in San Joaquin County and the cities in regards to homeless. Last issue in regards to Van Gogh. Yes, Jeff probably knows, and Walt, I have complained at COG for years in regards to the lack of public transportation in my district, which covers all for half the county. And Van Gogh is finally an opportunity to allow the residents outside in Clements and Lockford and Thornton, et cetera, to finally get some public transportation to the doctor's office, to shopping, et cetera. And it started in my district in the northwest part of the county, and because of the success up there, it went countywide. So I would say, as you discuss that with RTD, it is an opportunity that was absent in the past and has certainly provided better accessibility to the residents and certainly in the north part of the county. But other than that, I want to thank you for the opportunity, and you're doing a great job. Just keep it up and answer any question you may have.
Questions?
Great.
Chuck, great to see you again. Thanks for the updates.
Thank you.
All
No
right,
problem.
Keep us in the loop. Appreciate it.
Okay.
See you next week.
Anybody else before we move on to administrative matters? Okay. Then administrative matters, item number 8, consideration of appeal project 19-697, variance 1310. Marsh, thank you very much for coming tonight, by the way. Beautiful.
Forward it.
And let's
Supposed to be
see,
different?
Tammy, this is yours?
Did we talk to them? Oh, well, I don't know then. I don't know what you guys.
Are you on? This is yours?
Okay, so, well, I just
What is
want
that?
to say, this is really Dominique's item, but
Well,
this is an appeal from the Planning Commission's actions on this variance. And Mrs. Claire is here, and she has an attorney, and her attorney and I talked today. And then I talked to Mrs. Claire, too, before this meeting, and I think we've come to, my understanding, and she can confirm this, is that she is willing to withdraw this appeal as long as she doesn't have to sign an agreement that's recorded. And that's condition number 4. And so the conditions of the variance run with the land anyway, so there doesn't have to be a recorded document. They still run with the land. And in the past, my understanding is that staff has recorded the conditions without it even being signed anyway.
Okay.
And I think Dominique is confirming that the recorder will still record the document without any signatures. In other words, it doesn't have to be an agreement. It most likely can still be recorded. But even if it can't be recorded, those conditions still run with the land.
okay.
So my suggestion is that you deny this appeal, but on condition number 4, that you do remove the condition regarding a signed document. And I have some suggested language to change on condition number 4. That it would simply say, instead of, right now, condition number 4 says, the second sentence says, an executed copy of this agreement shall be recorded with the San Joaquin, et cetera, and that the cost of that will be paid by the applicant. And I would suggest just changing that to say, these conditions of approval shall be recorded with the San Joaquin County Recorder's Office, and then just delete that, the next sentence that would require her to pay for it. And other than that, I think we're all in agreement with what the Planning Commission did.
Did we hear from her?
Of course.
I have, before Ellen starts talking, I have a question about this document to begin with. What is the purpose of this?
The agreement?
Yeah, it's, if, I thought if there's a variance, the variance is approved, and why would you have
It
to
is.
record
Well,
recitals and
right.
boilerplate language on everything else?
Okay, so it's only because staff has, it's easier for staff to keep track of, rather than, in case something gets lost in the file, they can actually go to the recorded document. So my understanding, it was a staff wanted to change it so that there's a recorded document, and the idea being that the applicant would acknowledge those conditions by signing. It's not required. It's just a matter of convenience, I think, for staff and record keeping.
So with just the language in this, I wouldn't sign this. There's language in here that allows the owner of the property, the Clares in this instance, the owner consents and agrees that the city manager, city planner, or his or her representative may enter the subject property at any reasonable time for the purpose of ensuring owner's compliance with this agreement, and only for such purposes.
Right.
Why would I allow that?
Right.
I mean, it's outrageous.
Yeah, point well taken.
So, to me, either the variance is permitted or it's not.
Right.
And why would you need a secondary document to get recorded, particularly if the homeowner doesn't agree to it, and the city goes ahead and records it, clouds the title, so now you got a problem, somebody, if they want to sell the property and a buyer comes in or a title company comes in and says, yeah, there's this document here about this variance. Did you know you have all these conditions on your property? I mean, it's such an overreach in my view of the city, that I wouldn't sign it. And I think we need to revisit how you document the variance. I mean, the recitals, just pick up the planning commission minutes and you see what happened. I listened to the entire planning commission, and there was a lot of discussion, and, the big points were covered, but there are a lot of additional items in this document that I just don't.
Right.
I don't understand.
I don't disagree at all.
So
just the conditions, the list of conditions 1 through
Mhm.
20 would remain. The rest of it would be deleted. The conditions, can be recorded if the recorder will record them without signatures. If not, and if the council directs, they don't have to be recorded at all. They still run with the land, and as long as they're on the record, as you say, in the minutes, in the file, they still run with the land, whether they're recorded or not, just by operation of law.
Exactly. And looking at this, though, some of the language in here, it's very, very boilerplate, and it has, in my opinion, has no connection to the particular variance that was requested. And then, it's just code enforcement can enforce if they're in violation of
Right.
something. It just doesn't, why it needs to be in a recorded document, it's like you're on double secret probation. It just makes no sense. So.
Well, apparently it was done in the past with other planning directors. I didn't know that, but
So there's no requirement that this document even has to be recorded?
no, there's no requirement. Nope.
And that's the point. Just because we've done it in the past doesn't mean that it's right, or it's the right procedure, or the ordinance is
Yeah,
correct.
yeah, that's totally discretionary.
Yeah, I'm still uncomfortable having the city record something like this on somebody's property without the property owner agreeing to it. If there's enforcement that the city can take that runs with the land or is part of the conditions, then so be it. But if the variance is granted, we should have some record of that variance.
And the same with the conditional use permit. They're the same. They both run with the land. They don't have to be recorded. So I think that the council should direct whether or not you want any document to be recorded.
Well, because it seems like all three of these items that are being requested to be appealed have to do with that 8 pages, that document that you're talking about. So.
I mean, I'm looking at item 10, and I think that was another issue. Part of item 10 has already been complied with.
Right.
Then there's further requirements that if somebody listened to the meeting and understood what was talked about, the Clares, the chief had said that you could have a red curb where those oleanders were. And the Clares, instead of saying, yeah, go ahead and paint the red curb so we don't have to trim the oleanders, they agreed that, you know, you'd be giving up 4 or 5 parking spaces that the people that either are staff at the school or students want to park in that area. So why would you take away parking from them? But in exchange for that agreement with them, now they're being told, yeah, but you need to trim the oleanders, you need to trim the fence, you need to push things back, you know, so that people can open a car door. You know, so I just, and again, the bigger picture is, how is there any nexus between a pergola and a fire pit in their backyard with, you know, the initial requirement for a sidewalk, and now the oleanders, and I think the Clares were very reasonable in agreeing to a lot of the things that were suggested, but I think we've gone way beyond what this fireplace should trigger, in, you know, for this project. So I'm unhappy with the whole thing, you know. I mentioned it the last time that I was very pleased with how the Planning Commission approached it. There was a very good discussion. It seemed like when everyone left after that first meeting, it was a pretty good agreement. Everyone kind of knew where they were at. And then this document comes along, and there's additional conditions, or there's conditions that weren't really hammered out in the Planning Commission or in agreement with the Clares, that led to another Planning Commission meeting, a lot of conversation with the city and stuff. So I just don't like the process. I don't like what this project triggered. So again, just because it's been done in the past, it's not something that we need to continue in the future. So I have a real concern about that. And I'd hate to say, yeah, go ahead and record this document when we have an issue with it, when I personally have an issue with it, and we're revisiting the ordinance as it applies to the sidewalk issue, and we also had talked about revisiting ordinances for the sewer line requirement from the connection from the homeowner's property to the center of the street. So there's things that have come up in the course of our time on this council, when somebody brings a project to the city and it triggers all these, you know, requirements. When we see that there's a problem, we need to address the problem. So that's what I think we need to do here.
So I'm going to remind the council that this would be a motionable item if we want to address appealing any part of that decision, right? So, other comment? Yeah. Ellen?
I appreciate your time. Ellen Clare, 1310 Kern Street. So we started this back in March, and we wanted to build a structure in our backyard with a fireplace. And our variance was to go 1.5 feet to, rather than 10 feet from the back fence, 1.5 feet. Based on discussions with Planning Commission and changing these around, we agreed to the 3 feet. Okay, we've also kind of reduced the structure down to, it's a pergola. So originally it kind of had somewhat of a little bit of a solid ceiling, some openings. Now it's definitely a pergola, but never did it have sides or doors or windows and things like that. So out of that request to allow the structure or I didn't even think it was a structure, but allow the pergola to be closer than the 10 feet of the fence became, well, you must put in an ADA compliant sidewalk, you must remove the oleanders the first 25 feet, you must reduce your fence down to 30 inches, you must remove the oleanders, and so the process began. That little tiny thing just morphed into, let's just clean up everything that, you know, that we can throw at you. Okay, we don't have a problem with merging the lots. We understand that. We agreed to that in the first commission meeting. We agreed to take the oleanders out for the first 25 feet. That was the police department's recommendation, Planning Commission's recommendation, having to do with safety. We completed that within the week of going to the Planning Commission meeting. Since that point in time, it's just been a constant struggle, whether it be with the city of Escalon or documents that we're supposed to sign and, you know, what should be done. We believe that we will keep the oleanders trimmed. Right now we do it twice a year. If we need to do it 3 times a year, not a problem. We do not believe that we should have to lower our fence. We do not believe we should have to lower the oleanders. We do not believe we should put in an ADA compliant sidewalk or a sidewalk at all when it can never be ADA compliant unless the city or somebody removes the 2 PG&E power poles that are right within that very short distance between the corner of Kern Street and our driveway. Because the ADA compliant sidewalk is suggested to go, I don't know, probably 40 feet, and then it stops at the driveway. It goes no further. It encourages anybody that goes down that sidewalk to just dart across the street, across Yosemite, rather than adhering to Kern and Yosemite's sidewalk, which is ADA compliant throughout our front yard, and we do upkeep it. We have replaced it when the roots of the trees caused it to bulge. So we're keeping that particular section very well. So that's why we're appealing what the Planning Commission said, and we asked the city to grant that appeal. On top of not signing this document, and I agree, not even have it recorded. I believe that if we don't agree to the document, it cannot be just arbitrarily recorded with, in my mind, conditions that are covered with the permit. They talk about PG&E compliance, hazardous waste compliance, I don't know, 20 items, right? Well, when you pull your permit, they're not going to sign off on your permit unless PG&E agrees to it. You know, they're not going to allow you to dump hazardous waste when you're doing your project. The permit won't be signed off. The project won't be done. They'll red tag it. So I believe that when you pull the permit is when these kinds of things you are held accountable for, not in a 8-page or 9-page document.
And so what I want to make sure is that there's really 3 issues that we're really looking at, you know, that have been asked to be appealed specifically on a document. That if I'm understanding this now, there's no state, county, local ordinance requirement that it ever has to be filed.
Yeah, that it has to be recorded, right. So that's what we were talking about in condition number 4. The condition number 10, I mean, there's no longer any requirement to do anything with the fence or to put in a sidewalk. Those are gone.
If you don't record this document, then almost by default, then condition 10 doesn't exist either, because then the documents doesn't exist.
Well,
If it's not recorded anywhere.
well, I think this is where part of the confusion is. Is the variance, has it been agreed to, or has it been agreed to only if these conditions are met? And these conditions being everything that's laid out in this document, you know, all 20 items. And that's one of the issues.
Well, wasn't the variance already given?
Well, it sounds like the way I read this is it says, if you do these things, then.
That's right, that's right.
Okay.
But, yeah, so, but I think that all of those conditions have been agreed to, except for the recording of the document.
Well, and I think item 10 is the other issue. The 25 feet of oleanders were pulled out, and that made sense because you got a line of sight issue at the corner, and that was agreed to, and then it was done. But now it's gone further, because now the way I understand it is that side yard, the remaining oleanders and the remaining fence need to be chopped in half, or 30.
That's not.
No, do you have number 10 in front of you?
So, and
Giving number 10.
okay, so that issue isn't part of it, but only the trimming it back for the door, is that?
The planning commission defined it as 2 feet from the back of the curb to make sure that the oleanders didn't stick out further than that. But it wasn't removing the oleanders, it was only trimming them.
Okay, so
Right.
so as far as that condition though, it's no longer about the 30-inch side fence or the 36-inch side fence?
No, it doesn't say anything about the
No,
fence.
no, and that was gone, I mean, when they approved the variance, that was not in there.
Because that was one of the initial issues on the first planning commission meeting, from what I understand, is what
Right.
was the decision with the oleanders? And I don't know that ever got resolved, but if the trimming of the oleanders is now a setback from the curb,
Of 2 feet,
The
that's
idea
what
is
the
for like
planning
a door.
commission, yes, that's what the planning commission approved at the last meeting.
all right, so does that take care of the oleander issue?
Well, once again, if the document goes away, then it's fine. But if you read number 10, and I haven't gotten the final version from the Planning Commission, but it also just indicated that to changing condition 10 was just trimming the oleanders to 2 feet as opposed to when you open a car door, can they get out? It also states in there that, they can request this having to do with any health or safety or any other issue that comes up. And I believe that that can be taken care of in another, once again, if this document goes away, then this condition having to do with, okay, well, we also have this little, chip, if you will, on the Claires that, if we decided that it's a health or safety or something else, I'm going to pull out my variance document and, we're going to talk about the height of your fence and the height of your oleanders. I think that if the city decided through eminent domain to take a parcel of our land, to remove the power poles and put in a sidewalk and have us do that, we would fight that, of course, but it is what it is. But I don't believe that kind of language having to do with safety and health and something else like that needs to be in a condition.
Well, yeah, because the city already has authority if there's a public nuisance.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it just, it doesn't.
And I think for clarification, so I think that it's not, the intent is not that we're hanging this over you, but to make an applicant more informed that we are allowing this, but you could be subject in the future. It's not meant to say that we're hanging it over you. It was more of an informational that, yes, this is what we're allowing, but if there is a health and safety issue in the future, then we would have the right to come back and do some kind of code enforcement. So it's not meant to be like,
Yeah,
you
I
know.
don't see an evil intent on the city's part. It's just because we've done it in the past, why are we doing this? Because if it were a letter to the Claires and say, hey, this is a conversation that we had, this is our understanding of the agreement, but be advised, all the other codes and, authority that the city has are still in full force and effect, we're good. But then to take this and say, here's the conditions, and then go and record it against the property without an agreement or other things, that.
And I think that's why we've probably did where applicants have assigned the agreement. And not that I know this from past history, but my thought process would go to, you've had properties where you've allowed a variance, new owners have come in and assume that that can work in another area of their property if it's a reduced setback or whatever. And they don't necessarily know that because it wasn't in those title papers, it wasn't in that search. So when you do record it on the document and a new owner comes in, yeah, they become aware that, okay, I did get the previous owners or whatever got this approved, so I'm okay for the future. Or vice versa, whichever it may be, I mean, I guess that's
It could be a paragraph.
true.
But then again, to have it recorded, if there's we have parcel, documentation, on a particular parcel and it's in there was a variance for something, and documentation is with the city and available, great. I don't know how responsible we need to be to put something on a title that says, hey, there was a variance and, it's a one-time deal. But if that's what, the practice is and our city attorney thinks that that's a good approach, then we need to really revisit this. And, it shouldn't be anything more than, hey, this is a variance, this variance has been granted, and everything else remains in full force and effect, and the authority of the city remains in full force and effect. I mean, it just doesn't seem like it needs to be boilerplate language that creates, other issues, so.
Let's see, Ellen, do you mind, I think, Sean, you had some input on this one.
Yes.
If you don't mind, give Sean the podium just for a minute, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council again. Sean Stroman, Chair of the Planning Commission. So this process started March 12th. We met at the March 12th meeting we granted the variance. We, as the planning commission, we came to an agreement that the sidewalk, yeah, it was a little much. But I think we're missing one little piece of information. What started the variance is not just the pergola in the backyard. It started as the outdoor seating area, and on the March 12th meeting, we asked for a definition of what the term building is, because Escalon Municipal Code refers to any building or structure. That's what triggers the sidewalk discussion. So we continued the discussion to the April 9th meeting. We reviewed, after we discussed, we had asked staff to discuss with city attorney what the definition of building is, and we determined that the outdoor barbecue area wasn't a building. However, there are two other components to this variance. One is the merger of the lot lines, and the second is they would like to do an addition to their dining room, which, so it's three components all into one. So we granted, on April 9th, we granted the no sidewalk was needed. Then we talked about trimming back the oleanders based off the 25-foot triangulation at the corner, which we did, and we said, okay, we're in agreement. Then we also talked about the Escalon Municipal Code says that you have to have a 5-foot rear yard setback according to section 17.12.010 subsection 3.
I have a question for you, Sean.
Sure.
On the setback rule, are you aware of the fact there's an alley in this situation?
Yes, we are.
And how does that apply? The reason for the setback, isn't it because it's kind of privacy encroachment?
No, it has everything to do with firefighter access.
Well, how would that affect this situation?
Because you have a gas-operated fireplace on that rear yard, and they were trying to encroach into the 5-foot setback that's required for firefighter access. So they were encroaching in, originally it was 3 feet or 1 foot 9, and we said, okay, that's great, but you have to make that rear fence, because it's wood, you have to make that fireproof, because we're concerned about flames igniting that fence. So we said, you have to stucco the fence. That was a condition on the April 9th meeting. So
I get it.
gave a list of conditions. We said, okay, you're not gonna have to do the sidewalk. You just trim the oleanders back, but you have to stucco the rear sidewalk because it's a fire concern.
Yeah.
We all made an agreement, granted the variance. Well, June 11th, the Clares showed up again and had a disagreement with our interpretation of the oleanders and the setback and the sidewalk and stuccoing the fence. So on June 11th, we removed the requirement for stucco because, and we made an agreement that the pergola would be made out of non-combustible materials. Sorry, I'm looking at my phone for my notes. But on condition 10 at the June 11th meeting, the biggest concern as planning commissioners, you know, our job is to enforce the Escalon Municipal Code. This variance, yes, it grants a request, a variance for the Escalon Municipal Code. And on condition 10 with the oleanders, the issue is not trimming the oleanders. Everybody's fine with that. We recognize that the Clares are in such close proximity to the high school. They need the oleanders because otherwise they're gonna have kids staring right into their bedrooms. We agree to that. But as the Planning Commission, and I think I can speak on behalf of them, Kurt can correct me, but on condition number 10, the big thing was that we were trying to protect future planning commissioners as well as protect future city council because the Clares requested that this requirement just completely go away. And we felt as the planning commission that we needed to protect the city due to a life safety issue at that corner if there's ever an accident. So if you read this particular condition, The red flag is if there's a health or safety violation or a safety concern at that corner due to traffic. That's the only thing that we were trying to enforce. We're not asking them to tear down the oleanders, not trying to do any of that. But we felt that it was best that we protect the city, we protect planning commissioners, we protect city council members, that if there's ever an accident, the city council can go to the Clares and say, hey, this was a condition on your variance. There's been an accident. It's been a health safety concern. You got to take the oleanders down.
What about the pole that's on the corner?
That's PG&E.
Yeah, but that's a health, I mean, that's as much of an obstruction as anything.
But I'm also wondering, why couldn't we, don't we have the power to do that anyway? I know other situations, you'll have homeowners, the bushes around, I used to live next door to one. Bush, you cannot see around the corner. Eventually, the code enforcement had to tell them, you've got to trim that thing or get it out. They got it out. Why couldn't we ultimately, if there ever was an issue, do the same here?
Exactly what we would do.
So I'm continually going back to, I'm beginning to wonder, what are we doing here with this document that we don't have to have? That you're right, as, you know, start of this whole situation. And I appreciate your input very much.
The other issue is the sidewalk. As the planning commissioner, I think it is definitely fiscally irresponsible to force a homeowner in the city of Escalon to spend $6,000 on a $2,000 to put in a $2,000 pergola. I'm a construction manager. I deal with this all day, every day. However, in the same condition as number 10, the Clares did not want that condition included in the conditions of approval for this project. So what we talked about at the planning commission was that, look, we're going to include, you don't have to do the sidewalk now, but 5 years from now, they decide to do a 5,000 square foot addition to their property. If this condition stays as is, ultimately the Clares can come back to the city and say, we're doubling the size of our house, but we don't have to do the sidewalk anymore. And so I think, and we've asked staff to look at some different levels of, okay, what's the trigger for a sidewalk?
Right, right.
But without that, we don't have that in place currently. So without that, we have to have this in place right now in order to protect the city 10 years from now, 15 years from now. I mean, I don't necessarily think the Clares are going to add on that much to their house, but ultimately, it was the planning commission's decision to review it and keep this condition in on a case-by-case basis. In that, they ever do a monster addition, if this condition stays, they'll never have to do a sidewalk.
And point very well taken. I would make the argument that I think what Councilmember Legero mentioned in the last meeting as to look at, you know, recrafting that ordinance to establish more relevant triggers. I think time is of the essence of that ordinance.
Right.
I think that because I know that there are others that would love to ask for exceptions right now too.
Of course.
So I think again, you know, if you grant one exception, you better be ready to grant a whole bunch of exceptions.
Exactly.
You know, so.
And our job as the planning commissioner is not to make homeowners' lives miserable at all.
Right.
I think that the planning commission, I mean, you can see, we talked about it March 12th, we talked about it April 9th, we talked about it June 11th. That's just the planning commission time. What about the staff time that has been spent on this? So,
Well, that's one thing, a well-crafted ordinance that defines some very good triggers negates all of what we're talking about now. You know, and it would probably make life a lot easier for everybody. So.
Well, and that's the point too. The staff time, planning commission time, council time over something that needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed on a much broader scale than every single time one of these projects comes before the planning commissioner, comes to staff.
and I think staff is working on that. I mean, we asked for them to bring it back to the July meeting. I mean, Dominique is a superhero. I don't know if she can do that much in a little time, but I do know that staff is working on it.
She's pretty good.
But if we keep this sidewalk requirement in right now, all bets are off, because then we'll have to talk about it at the July meeting. And so it's almost like when is it ever going to end? So, and I'm sure the Clares feel the exact same way.
If we keep the sidewalk requirement in as part of like, as it's written right now, right?
I would suggest that. And if
So
they're,
the sidewalk requirement's not,
It's out.
it's
completely
out. What they, at the June 11th meeting, it was asked by the Clares that we put that they would be exempt from future projects. So that part was not added into the,
Right.
Okay.
to the,
Right.
yeah.
I apologize, I
Right.
missed.
No,
Yeah,
you're right.
so there's
you're right.
nothing now in here about a sidewalk except for some language. Dominique, do you have this final version for the council?
Yes, they have it.
Yeah, they have a copy.
Okay.
I was
So if we
actually,
could-
I was going to volunteer to build the Clares pergola, just as a matter of good faith.
So just to clarify, Mrs. Claire is appealing the planning commission's decision to us, and so we can overturn it
Or you can
and let her do what she wants, right?
Yeah, you can change these conditions. You can revise the conditions.
We can allow her to build her thing on her property the way she wants?
Well, she's already, the variance is already approved for them to do that. It's just a question of what are the conditions of that approval.
Well, I just wanted to hear
More so-
exactly from her what she wants again, because I didn't get a clear understanding of what she's,
Oh, what she
Hoping
doesn't
for.
want, she doesn't want there to be an agreement, number
right,
one.
she's,
She doesn't want it to.
can you
be
clarify again what you'd like?
I would like to build the pergola within 3 feet of the back of the house, I believe it is, and 3 feet from the back of the fence. And 3 feet from the home, so that it's a freestanding pergola, and I don't want any conditions.
Okay.
Haven't you already received the variance for that?
No, it's been,
It's,
well, okay, I got the variance for allowing that, but then it had the 20 conditions.
Had conditions.
So and that's where we're struggling with all of these conditions, and it was stated to us numerous times that you have to sign this.
Yeah. I want to just
Therefore, we didn't want to.
chime in, because, I mean, that's why we were elected to, represent our views and everything about the town. And from everything I understand on this particular case, these people want to build something on their property, and we just piles and piles of red tape and variances and all these things, and now we signed something on their recorded on their property, and it sounds like it's gotten way out of hand. And if I had to vote, I would vote to do exactly what she just said, which is she wants to build this thing 3 feet, no variances, and I would vote to approve that.
well, not to move this along, but this is a motionable item, and so we'll need to have some motion in some direction in order to vote something.
I
At
would,
least have something on the table to discuss.
can I make a motion?
Sure.
I would move to approve the appeal of what Mrs. Claire wants done, to not have anything recorded on the property, and to allow her to build the pergola in the way that she wants.
We have a little more discussion on this.
We will have more discussion. I want to make sure that you say the appeal not to have anything recorded.
I want to, nothing recorded on
Nothing,
the,
or this 8-page document. It sounds like this 8-page document's the issue.
the 8-page
You
document.
we need to probably legally have something recorded, like she was given a variance.
Can I ask Ann a question? Since we're in agreement that this document is not the right approach, and there's language in it that is disagreeable, what is the recommendation from the city attorney? Is
Okay.
a way forward without the document, with,
So for this appeal, I mean, I'm going to be very specific in my recommendation.
Right.
And so if you have this final set of this final agreement that the Planning Commission came up with, I would suggest approving the variance with the 20 conditions, but without an agreement, just the 20 conditions, with a change that I
Noted on 4.
that I noted on number 4, and also with a change to number 10. I would just delete everything after the first 2 sentences that talks about, although the city is not requiring this now, that in the future, if public health or safety requires this, I mean, that's already a fact, so it doesn't need to be in that condition.
So, bottom line is there's really, the only purpose for this document is for some historical record for the city.
Right, yeah, and for notice to future property owners if
So,
in other words, item number 10 would read, you're just keeping the first, your suggestion is to keep the first
It's
sentence.
the first two sentences, this also says the bushes have to be trimmed at least 2 feet from the back of curb.
Okay, okay. So let's go with this. Councilmember, oh, no, I know. I'm just saying, Councilmember Cronick's made a motion, hasn't been seconded yet. And I just want to remind everybody where we're at. And Councilmember Alves?
What I'm a little confused about, Ann, is that I'm looking at these 10 things, and every one of them is pretty much standard, no matter what we do in this town.
Yeah.
So why is it on paper? It's in every rule book we have. I mean, I'm a little confused.
It's an informational item too. I mean, it's so that the property owner understands what's
So
expected.
Why can't we just give it to her and tell her to read it? I understand why we had to go through the formality of recommending that she signs it. It almost feels, it's uncomfortable, and I understand. I don't blame you guys for doing your job. You're doing your job exactly the way it probably should be done. But at the same time, I think you gotta understand where maybe this person would feel intimidated by the fact you gotta sign this or you're not gonna do your project. I just think, especially because everything on here is already common knowledge. There's nothing here that is extraordinary. It's all pretty much in the rule book. So that's what's confusing me the most. I don't understand why we got to that point. How many, do we do this on everybody we deal with?
That goes through on every project that goes to planning
I've never
commission.
seen one before.
Every discretionary project.
Discretionary.
So as, at city staff level, we have a standard set of conditions of
Right.
approval, which are those 20 items that are general in nature, explanation-wise, because a lot of people aren't aware of that type of information. Then we get the project. The project is, depending on what the code says, sent out to the people within 300 feet, sent to local agencies for comment or review, depending on the type of project. And then they provide comments and feedback, which we incorporate into the document. So if PG&E provided a comment letter, the PG&E item goes in there so that they know this is one of the stipulations, along with getting a copy of the comment letter. So all of these conditions of approval are, that's what they are. They're basic template language, and then we go in according to the project and narrow it down specific to the project. And then in the process of reviewing the project, city staff reviews it in conformance with the municipal code, and we point out anything that's in the code that we're required as staff to implement. So the sidewalk issue came in. The fencing in the bushes came in because the fencing in the bushes, according to municipal code, are not supposed to be higher than 3 feet tall if they're within the first 10 feet of the frontage of the property. So we point those things out, we show them to planning commission, and we either provide recommendations if there's issues of concern, which would be health, safety, that type of thing, or if we think they're gonna pose some type of problem. And if they're not, then we let the planning commission decide, and so that's what planning commission decide. We gave them the information, this is what our code says, this is what we've stipulated as a condition because of what the code says, and because it's discretionary, it goes to the planning commission, and they make the decision whether or not they think it's reasonable to enforce it on that project at the time. And so all this talk about, locking councils and locking planning commission, and we did have a different attorney subbing for Ann at that time, but it was always our understanding, it's always on a project-by-project basis that we don't recommend, and it was staff's understanding that we don't want to put future commissions and city councils in the position where they're saying you don't ever have to put sidewalks in, ever. You don't ever have to put, or take your fence down, or have, if you have an issue with the bushes, ever have to address it, to where something, we go ahead, we approve it that way, it gets signed and recorded, and then later on, the school district calls and says they're getting complaints about that issue, and they're demanding, and this is just an example, that we address that issue because they're getting complaints, and they're getting this, and we're the body responsible for that. We wouldn't have been able to come back and enforce that if we signed away we locked ourselves into an agreement. So the planning commission moved forward with making reasonable at the time, you know, and the project has changed over time. Over projects, it's gotten less and less. It's not the fully loaded project that it was in the beginning. And still, and we'll be working on the sidewalk issue, and it's different across cities from what I'm looking into. Everybody has their own threshold, and I'm sure we're going to put something, you know, that's effective in our city, and that's totally fine. But we did our job in providing that information to Planning Commission and letting them make the decision on what they thought should be applicable and what they thought shouldn't be applicable.
The reason I'm made my motion to let the property owner do what they want is it's too many codes. It's too many codes, it's too much government, it's too much government involvement in our lives. To me, it's just a principal issue that this lady wants to build a fireplace in her backyard and it's taken months and months and months and months and months and now we got to sign something on. It's too much. And so I'm 100% against getting involved in private people's lives and private property. And so it's too much for me, so.
So just so I can clarify. So the sidewalk issue has been removed. The variance is approved within the 3 feet of the fence. There's no stucco that's required on the fence. The fence remains as is. The pergola will be built out of appropriately fire-resistant materials.
That's building code.
The oleander issue is a 25-foot setback, which is already in a separate code somewhere that requires that 25 feet. So what is in this document that is not already provided for in our code?
That's not already provided for where?
In our code, somewhere.
Somewhere else in our codes.
If they went back and planted the oleanders within that 25 feet, we have a code that would allow the city to go and say, you gotta yank those out, right? So so other than that, what else is there that by granting this variance, that the city needs this document to grant them authority to do?
And it's not so much granting authority, so much as a lot of people in town aren't aware of our rules and regulations. That's why you see so many places in town that aren't in compliance.
Right.
And we don't have the staffing for that. So it's basically letting the person who's come to the city, pulling their permits, going through the process to have their stuff done through the city with the correct approvals and all that stuff, to give them that information. And so as what was done in the past, they were signing the agreement, and so we've continued doing that. If we don't want to do it that route, we don't have to do it that route. But we've never looked at it as, for us, it was more just serving. We had you come in the next day, we talked about everything and made sure it was reading what the Planning Commission's action was, and then you'd sign for it, and then we'd record it.
Right.
So
the bottom line is,
it's all general
this is informational, and this is information that is provided to the property owner. Said, hey, here's some conditions that apply regardless of the variance, just general knowledge, not something that needs to be recorded. It's just information provided to them. They have a copy of it. All the conditions have been met for the variance. So at this point, I see no purpose of requiring this document be signed or to have it recorded. They have a copy of it. It can go with their records. If they sell the property, they can pass it on. The city will have a copy. If somebody comes in and asks about the property or the pergola or whatever, we'll have a copy of it. And it's something that needs to be revisited. But right now, I'm looking at this project and where we're at and what we're being asked to do. So I'd like to refine Peter's motion that for this particular project, the conditions have been met. The conditions specifically that have been talked about here, the setback, the no need for the stucco or make the fence fire resistant because the pergola is going to be made out of the right materials, and the 25-foot setback on the oleanders has already been taken care of. So I see no other conditions that need to be met for that variance to be granted. Am I missing anything?
No, so you're saying for this project, the conditions have been met,
So I would move to approve the variance based on the conditions having been met that were set by the Planning Commission and approved by the council. The issue about the sidewalk in the future or the oleander issue, we have no authority at this point because we don't know what that ordinance is going to look like. So the sidewalk could be an issue in the future. but there should be a new ordinance that will address that more appropriately, and then the staff, if a project is brought to the staff, they can look at that, and if that's not good, it goes back to planning commission, the same way it went here, and then if need be, it comes to us. But the sidewalk issue is in the works of being addressed, so I don't really see that as a future issue at this point. Maybe it will be, but I don't think we have the authority to just say never on that one.
Okay, so we have, actually, we have two motions on the table. Neither one of them have been seconded as of yet. I will ask for a second for one of the other.
I think mine is actually an amendment of Peter's.
Yeah.
What would you like, do you accept the amendment?
I would accept the amendment.
Second, thank you.
Hold on, yeah.
Clarification, what I heard you saying is the variance is approved with the conditions that the planning commission put on them.
The variance is approved and the conditions that are required have been met.
And Jamie, I'm gonna ask you to restate
I
the
see no
motion
other
in a minute, so I
conditions
hope
in
you're
here
getting it
that
down
have-
right.
I think we have to,
Have been met, but that implies that there are conditions.
The conditions were the 25-foot cut back of the oleanders. And that's based on whatever this other ordinance is. I think it's
traffic.
17.41.030. So that's been met, so you've got the authority to enforce that in the future if they replant the oleanders.
And
So that's a
so
condition.
are you removing all the other conditions then?
I think, I'm not sure.
Because
You tell me
Well,
what I need to
she's
say.
only asked for these changes to 4 and 10. I mean, the appeal is to change the number 4 and number 10.
Okay, so if we change number 4 and 10 on this document, is an amended document going to be given to the Clares with those conditions?
Yes.
And then this document is going to be informational only.
It'll be in the minutes that those are the conditions that, of the variance. But the document, there will be no recorded document.
Okay, I still don't like the document.
Do you wanna strike 4 and 10?
so,
Now I want to strike the document.
Okay.
I believe that if you are amending 4 and 10, then ultimately what you're doing, you're denying the appeal because you're following the recommendations of the planning commission. So if you deny the appeal,
If you strike 4 and 10, right?
so they
Well, they would be approving the appeal to the extent that condition 4 would not require an agreement to be recorded.
okay, so I can't tell you how to do your job, but if you say no sidewalks, there's gonna be a lot of upset homeowners throughout the city because our job, I mean, we've been enforcing this. On this particular variance, we agreed no sidewalks because of the size of the pergola. And like staff was saying, the scope of the project significantly changed. I mean, we went from a full-blown outdoor shelter with a gas fireplace, stucco, TV above the fireplace, and now we're talking about a specific pergola.
But the condition number 10, that installation of sidewalk to have a continued variance, that's no longer in condition 10.
right, but that was what her appeal, that's what the appeal was to add that back in, to add the sidewalk. Yeah, to add that it wouldn't apply.
So I can't
till the
speak for
code changed.
Mrs. Claire. She's obviously here. She can speak for herself. However, the Planning Commission's recommendation to council is to leave the condition for the sidewalk in for the future, for any future project.
So basically, it's not leaving the sidewalk, in there, it's not adding that future projects would not be,
Right.
We're not waiving.
susceptible to it.
Waiving the requirement for sidewalks potentially in a future project.
Correct.
Right.
Because, number one, the ordinance currently is under review. We don't know what it's gonna look like when we're done with it. We don't know what the triggers are gonna be, and we don't know what future projects they may or may not bring to us.
Which is exactly why the Planning Commission made the decision that we did, because the ordinance is still ongoing.
So, and I don't have a problem with what the planning commission has done. It's just trying to clear, my issue is with this document and why the city requires this and what we do with it. And the conditions that, the way I understand them, that the planning commission dealt with, have all been dealt with.
Right.
And that there's other codes on the books to enforce the removal of the 25-foot sightline, obstructions.
It's my interpretation, though, that the Clares don't want any conditions on this. So for this particular project, we're filing an appeal. We don't want any conditions. And as the planning commissioners, we're saying, no, we want to include these conditions for any future projects, or in the case of the oleanders, if it's a result of a major life safety issue. Because at that corner, if there's ever an issue and someone gets seriously hurt, the Clares can say, we have a variance from the city that we didn't.
No,
have to
too
touch."
many.
But what we're saying is that is already covered in the code. It's just
Okay.
never been enforced. And now with this project, it becomes, oh, wait a minute, we have this code on the books that you need a 25-foot line
And
of sight.
that's done.
And that's what, and I'm looking at it like, okay, if these ordinances are on the book, whether it's installation of sidewalks, 25-foot sight line, setback from the fence, you're granting the planning commission, and I agree with the planning commission on the setback issue, not requiring the sidewalks and the 25-foot sight line. Those conditions I'm fine with, and I think the Clares are fine with that. They've agreed to all of that. So what it boils down to is, I guess we are approving the planning commission's decision.
So you're denying the appeal.
Well, I'm not sure, because
Okay.
it sounds like it sounds like the language is that there are some exceptions, and that's being this document.
Okay. So,
And the filing of the document and that kind of thing. So
The-
that's
the-
why I'm
the-
asking Ann for
okay.
that language, to make sure that we're clear on what we're doing here. And I don't know that we are.
So what we could do is, after a project is approved by the planning commission, we always follow up with an action letter that has the conditions of approval in the letter, which basically says these were the following conditions that were approved by the planning commission. So being specific to variances, what we can do is leave it at that. We have the letter, the action letter that gives the action from the planning commission, and it does have a list of conditions of approval, and if we need to work on those, we can work on them. But at this point, we keep it at action letter. This document would not be created anymore. We would just have the action letter with the 1 through 20 conditions, and it might be less than that, and it doesn't have the recitals in it and that information, and it would just go a copy to the property owner and a copy into the file, and we would leave it at that. And if that works for everybody,
Yeah, well, how do we deal with this situation,
I
though?
think
It does.
I think that works.
okay.
But I think to be even more clear, okay, the action items are, that they have removed the 25 feet of the oleanders pursuant to 17 point whatever ordinance. Cite the ordinance, not this.
Okay.
And say, okay, you've met this condition. The setback has been approved by the planning commission. The 3-foot setback has been approved by the planning commission, and no need to install ADA compliant sidewalks. I mean, I don't know how detailed this needs to be, but if that's just the document and those are the conditions, and those conditions have been met by the Clares at this point, then the variance gets issued, or the permit gets issued. Am I?
Well, I think,
Clear as mud.
Yeah,
I mean-
am I watering this thing down too much? I mean, to
I
me,
just
that's.
I don't agree with saying that because the the conditions have been met. I think that you're saying, with these conditions met, then we've granted this variance. So you need to list what those conditions were.
conditions were.
Regardless if
Gotta
they've
go
been
back
taken
again.
care of or
Right.
not,
You're
they
re-
still should be listed.
Yeah, you're just reviewing what the conditions that the planning commission put on them, whether they've been approved or not since that is kind of not the issue. So why not just approve the variance with the 20 conditions, except for, not having an agreement I mean.
With the modification to number
modifications
4
to number 4
and number
and
10.
number 10.
So are you suggesting to strike 4 and 10?
Not strike them.
The adjustments.
Say just-
Changing of the language.
So that there's no reference to being recorded.
So my problem with
Let's
the
stand together.
20
Let's stand here.
conditions
There you
is,
go.
What was it?
my problem with the 20 conditions is that it doesn't have to do with the variance. It has to do with the code of the city. It has to do with, these are the things that you have to do when you're getting your permit. So there's no reason to have 20 conditions on a letter that goes to me. If I don't get PG&E to approve something in my permitting process, I'm not going to get my permit signed off.
So you've already been given these 20 conditions.
I've been given this letter with these 20 conditions, and I don't think that there needs to be 20 conditions. I think that what the planning commission said to me was, you do not have, the condition was, for my variance, was remove the oleanders for the first 25 feet from the corner.
Right.
Done.
Okay.
That is the only condition that applies to this variance. Everything else follows a permit.
And-
And that makes sense, because the permit would not, well, the plans would be submitted, they've been approved with the 3-foot setback, and so, and the conditions of installing sidewalk isn't a condition of it.
No,
So
there's
we're,
nothing.
I
And
think,
all, these 20
it's
conditions are
negatives.
the same conditions that everyone gets.
Everyone gets those.
They're just a restatement of existing law. There's no, I mean, if you delete all those conditions, that
They
you're
still
treating-
apply.
They still apply, you're treating this one
Totally agree, so why
differently.
it's on, that's, I get 100%, when I don't get it, then why is it here? It's exactly right.
It's an
already-
informational.
Informational thing so that she knows, hey, don't put a ton of bacon grease down the drain, please, little things like that, courtesy things.
Documentation of the CEQA review.
But it just, it's unnecessary. It has nothing to do with the variance. It has to do with following the rules, having to do with the permit. I don't know, being a good citizen or whatever. Why do I need a 9-page document mailed to me, even if it's an action letter or another document that becomes unsigned, goes in our file having to do with our property with 20 conditions, which are, it just should not be that way. If I will submit the pergola project, it will be to code. If I miss something on that code, you guys tell me. If I, didn't put something in there that needs to go a half-inch lower, the pergola will be to code, and it will be permitted and signed off to code. So will the fireplace, and I removed the first 25 feet of the oleanders.
Well, you saw the 20 conditions already,
Right.
right? And they're not gonna go away. They don't have to be recorded anywhere,
No.
But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people, though, have no idea. PG&E review, why do I gotta have a PG&E review before I dig a hole?
That's not- I mean-
things like that.
Yeah.
There's a purpose for this information.
But
A lot of people may not have
I
a
think
clue.
PG&E must have responded to the project.
Well, yeah, but I'm
provided a
just
comment,
picking one out. I'm just picking one out. CEQA, what's CEQA? I mean, so I can see there's a value, I think, to be giving in a general sense.
I don't think they should be considered conditions. They could be like, oh, you're doing a project, and maybe everybody that gets a permit, oh, you want to ask for a permit? Here's a bunch of things that you need to be sure you're aware of,
Yeah,
which the
whatever,
city
yeah.
already gives you when you go and get the permit. They say, well, PG&E's got to review it. Hazardous material. They give you all of that.
We had that in Southern California, it was called a Type 5 sheet. When you went to build a house, they gave you the Type 5 sheet, and the Type 5 sheet basically had all the requirements for a house. And they just gave it to you, standard, when you walked in the door.
But how could,
We have to follow those rules, or my pergola and fireplace are not going to be signed off.
now, how can the planning commission, though, if there are specific requirements for a project, how can the planning commission express those if they don't have those on something like this? I'm just curious.
It's, as planning commissioners, it's our interpretation. Those are standard boilerplate information. It's just information only.
What gets different, excuse me, Sean, is the number 10 with the bushes.
Right.
Okay. That's a specific one, or the stucco fence.
So I have an idea,
Yeah.
and I think it will satisfy Mrs. Claire, it will satisfy staff, it will satisfy planning commissioners. Why don't we break it out and say general conditions, and list all the standard boilerplate stuff. And then underneath that, list specific requirements for this variance. And then we list 4, we list 10.
That sounds good.
That way, the
Standard.
Clares understand this is
Standard-
just
standard
all
conditions,
standard
general
boilerplate stuff.
Standard
And then for their specific project, you have these 5 items.
So, my question is, are we at the point where we just need to go back and rewrite this thing?
Yeah, and we can make those updates immediate.
Okay?
What do you mean? Are you suggesting this could be continued, or, I mean, I think,
Well, I really don't want any of this to be continued. But I think that if we, it almost sounds like we need to be doing, like, either rewrite it. I think your idea is very well taken. I think it's a great idea. But I also am trying to get out of this particular situation so that you're familiar with these. I don't want to, in other words, I don't want to create the precedent where, okay, you know what? Don't worry about it in this case, you know? I don't want to say that, because that's a bad road to go down.
well, if the, you know, the planning commissioner, your suggestion, we could do that. We can break them up, modify condition 4 and 10, put standard conditions here, specific conditions there, and that is that's your decision, that you approve the variance with those conditions as modified, and
But what are the?
reorganize.
You need to get the modifications tonight if we're going to approve it tonight,
Yeah.
though.
I think what you can do, and again, I can't speak for the Clares, but if you modify the variance, the language of the variance to have it as general conditions of the city, and then underneath that, you have specific requirements for this variance, that will satisfy you, that will satisfy that will satisfy the city attorney, but most importantly, that will satisfy the Clares. And the Clares can actually build their pergola.
Will that?
I don't know.
What do you-
Will it?
I feel like I'm just standing up for the citizens of Escalon.
Do it. Yeah.
I believe that what Ed was said is that you go in, and you want to do a project, and there are 50 things that you have to do on a specific project. The planning commission, not the planning commission, the building department hands you that piece of paper and says, here are the 50 conditions, because if you don't do these 50 conditions, your permit is just not going to be executed.
Yeah, that's.
Then if there is a condition, whether it be a variance or something like that, I go to the planning commission and they say, okay, you can build it 3 feet here, 3 feet here, but you have to remove these 25 feet of oleanders. Okay, fine. It's done. And it's done. And that is the only thing that is in our file, because all the other conditions are not specific to our project. They're specific to the permits that the building department issues.
True.
Go to the planning department.
They're not specific to the building permit process. They're specific to obtaining a code variance from the city. So if we don't include that information in the variance, there's no way that it can be included in the building permit. It gives homeowners an opportunity at first, when they get a variance, to say, hey, you have to comply with these general conditions of the city.
Yeah, there's got to be, I'm like one point, there's way too many things, and they're based upon the idea of safety, public safety, and that's easy to pass a code and say, oh, it has to do with safety, and it's a total farce. It doesn't always have to do with safety. It's just, but it's easy to pass. The other thing is, there's got to be a way we can make a motion, approve the Clare's appeal without having it set this precedent for future things. Isn't there some way we can say, in this particular case, we are approving the appeal, and this does not apply to future projects?
When the minute that you approve the appeal, you're disregarding the planning commission's requirements. So if you approve the appeal, then no sidewalk ever, no issues with safety, and
No sidewalk ever. I thought that the
Because
sidewalk
she's
was.
Modified it since then,
she's-
Sean.
she's-
She's
She
modified
changed it, yeah.
Yeah, she wants to change to condition 10 that says she'll never have to put a sidewalk in.
But
That's what it was originally.
Until the city decides
updated.
what their.
Right, but that's
what
not
their
appropriate to
plan
put in this variance. It's
Okay,
not,
so,
it's
but
not
still,
appropriate.
the condition, there was one condition that I was asked to do, and it was remove the 25 feet of the oleanders. That was I understand that supposedly, if you do a variance, you gotta have these 20 conditions listed, which maybe I disagree with, you need these 20 conditions listed. But the thing that came out of it was remove the 25 feet of oleanders. And that was done.
Well, that's what I'm thinking.
So what's the, what, I don't know what you're getting
The
at.
point is that, well, personally, I think that this document with the 20 conditions that then the planning commission may have to live by or whatever, but I don't think that that should be conditions that are specific to a variance. I think they are once again, things that the city of Escalon, in a building department standpoint, hand to anybody wanting a permit to say, here are the things that you have to do to get our permit. You have to get PG&E to inspect it if it's necessary. Probably I didn't need PG&E if I wasn't running a gas line. Maybe I needed PG&E because of the lines above my house. I'm not sure, you know, but, and then, I mean, I can't even remember the 20 of them, but there's a lot, and it only should have to do with the building department handing it to someone that wants to come in and do a permit.
So
Okay, this is a discretionary, this is,
Right.
a variance is discretionary. So,
Councilmember
once again-
Legero, you made a motion a little while ago, and I do believe it had a second. Can you restate that motion as best you can, please? Or would
Okay,
you like to rescind it, but the second one have to be rescinded as well, so that we can clean up the board? Because right now, there is a motion on the table, and that you made
We
it.
don't even know what it is.
I want to just clean this up.
He made the motion, he amended the motion. I
Okay.
have a question. So, we have two choices. We grant the appeal, and if we grant the appeal, what are the conditions that we are saying have to be met for the variance?
Well,
What's listed in
I
the
would
staff
recommend that you grant the appeal with respect to
Item
Re-
4.
item 4.
Condition 4.
that's all, and deny the other two requests, the requested changes to item 10. You grant the appeal with respect to condition number 4.
And direct staff not to record.
Direct staff not to record.
Do you
That
want
would
to-
mean this document, page 1 is gone, all the language regarding the agreement are gone. We're left with just 1 through 20, change in number 4, a slight change in number 10, and that's what her attorney said, was that we're all in agreement.
And the change number 10 is strike everything but the first two sentences,
Right.
right? Okay, I agree with that. Do you want to rescind your previous motion, because this sounds a little cleaner?
Yes, I'll rescind it.
You
Let's start over.
rescind it.
We're all back to.
Yeah, I rescind mine.
Now we're clean.
Clean slate.
Okay. So, if we deny the appeal, then where are we at?
If you deny the appeal, then she still has to sign a document and have it recorded.
Okay. All right.
So I would deny the appeal with respect to there are 3 things that the appeal covers.
3 issues.
And I think you've all agreed that you agree to uphold the appeal with respect to her request for condition number 4.
Okay, so the applicant has requested to appeal to the city council the following items for their project. Okay, so my motion is as to condition 4, we grant the
Uphold the appeal.
uphold the appeal to remove the conditions of approval regarding a signed document. Condition number 10, a variance to not reduce the height of fence or the height of the oleanders. That has been addressed already. There's no language in 10 that pertains to the height of the fence or the height of the oleanders.
No, it only pertains to the trimming back.
Trimming of 2
From
feet
the
from
curb.
the curb. It does include the trimming 2 feet from the curb.
But we strike the other
Language about
future issues.
So item 10 on, okay, so.
You're just going to go with the
problem-
first 2 sentences.
Well, the problem
It's
is
already
that
done.
what is in the document in the packet is different than the document that we're looking at, right?
Correct.
So,
True.
Because we didn't have, staff didn't have time to update that to get it to the council agenda. So we
Okay, so item 4 we've dealt with, item 10. So the language in item 10 would be, in order to move forward with this project, oleander bushes within the traffic view area on the corner of Yosemite Avenue and Kern Street shall be removed. Period.
Yep, stop.
That's been done.
And the second
And then the
sentence.
second sentence is still
Okay,
applicable.
the oleander bushes along the taller existing fence may remain at this time. However, the bushes must be trimmed at least 2 feet from the back of the curb, period.
What does it mean if they will be allowed to last at this time? What does that mean?
Because technically they're in the right of way. They're not, it's not to code where her fence and where those oleanders are.
Well, is there any such thing as a grandfather clause in this situation? When that thing's been there, what, 100 years?
Well, she's not asking for, okay.
But my point is, I mean,
Let me just ask.
Go ahead.
Let me just ask Ellen, is that acceptable?
I don't think there needs to be specific language in there as to how closely we trim them. I think that if the police department or the city came to us and said, oh, you need to trim just a little bit more, you know, rather than someone getting their little tape measure out and measuring 24 inches, we would do that. I think we keep them well trimmed.
Right.
And we intend to keep them trimmed. So
Okay.
I just think that it needs to be 24 feet.
Yeah, so let me ask that. Is there a code that covers?
How we came up with the 2 feet is because we figured, okay, all car doors are varying sizes. 2 feet allows a bigger person to open up the car door if they're parked along that sidewalk and can get out. That's how we came up with it. There's no magical formula. It's just open the
I
car
gotta be
door and
honest
get
with you, I got curious with that today, and Ellen, actually, I drove by, with my truck, and I go, okay, well, how can you get out? Yeah, you can get, it's probably, like, maybe a foot and a half right now. I mean, you would get out, you probably wouldn't want to scratch the door, but it's close. It's close. So what you're saying is, the 2 feet, it's in the ballpark, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
So I don't, to my knowledge, there's no code section that says that you have to keep bushes trimmed a certain distance from.
I mean, technically, they're not supposed to be there, so,
It was just what works.
yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
So in order to address that, if it became a problem later,
the encroachment on
Then-
public property is what it is. It's encroachment.
but the city would have to bring, theoretically, have to bring some type of nuisance.
Well, why would they have to bring a
Action.
nuisance if it's part of it, if it's it actually is a code where you can't encroach on public domain? It's like gates on fences. If you
Yeah,
open your
but-
gate
so it's a
onto a
code
public
enforcement.
sidewalk, that's illegal.
Yeah, well, but you'd have to still enforce it through code
Well,
enforcement.
okay, you would have to enforce it, I agree, but the point of the language is already there. We have laws that say you cannot encroach on public domain. That's a law.
Right, but having it in here eliminates the future possibility of having to code enforce against it.
What, you're gonna have to code enforce if they don't do it anyway, correct?
Yeah.
So what is the point? That's, the thing that confuses me the most, and I'm just trying to get past all this, is it's like doublespeak. We understand from the beginning what's needed and what isn't needed, because we have codes and stuff, but yet now we're restating them again, it's like repetitious, and I don't understand what the point of that is.
Well, you can delete that sentence, or you can change it to just to say the oleander bushes.
Let's stick with sentence number 1.
Why couldn't you
Let's
just
go
say
with
that
number 1.
according to city code?
Because if you say according to city code, they would have to be removed.
Yeah.
We just keep the first sentence, which just means they've already done it.
Yep.
Because otherwise, we can go 2 feet, half a foot and a half, we can talk all day long.
Okay.
Just go with the first sentence there on item 10. If
Got
they've
it.
already done it,
Okay.
it's
That's
done.
fine.
Now what's next?
Okay, so I think that those were the 3 issues that were raised in the document in our
Appeal.
Right.
Appellate packet.
You're denying the third request, though, about the installation of sidewalk?
Yeah, I don't think we can have I don't think we're in a position to do that because we don't know what the ordinance is and we don't know what the future projects are gonna be. And I think that has a greater impact citywide.
And you'll have a flood of people looking for exceptions, right, between then and now.
Well, and we don't have an ordinance that we're
No
really looking
defensible
to.
ordinances.
Well, that means we gotta get that ordinance up quick.
So, grant the appeal to number 4, grant the appeal as to item number 10.
Sentence 1.
Sentence 1, ending at,
After the first sentence.
removed, period.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
And
we got
then
that done.
And
item number 10, deny the appeal, based on the issues that
Regards to
have
the
been
site.
raised.
Okay.
And
That's-
then, as far as the document goes, it's informational only, per item number 4. It's informational only. It can be provided, the declarers have a final copy of it can be provided to them.
Right.
And, our understanding is that there is nothing in this document that is, that creates new authority within the city to, enforce, against the declarer's property that doesn't already exist.
Right. Mhm.
And then I would also add, as to, on page 5 of 9, item 3, the owner makes the following additional representations and agreement. I would strike,
We're removing that whole
My
section.
thought is that that whole page is gone. It's after condition
20.
number 20.
item 2, the owner's agreement, everything's gone, right?
Right, only the 1 through 20 remains, and they're called conditions of approval. They're not called an agreement,
Okay.
and they won't be recorded. Is that?
I don't like the term conditions of approval. I think it's informational with the exception of item 10. And 4, I guess, but 4 is gone. Does that sound right?
Well,
But
these
the
are
minute,
almost,
but the minute that you say these are for informational only, somebody cannot follow them and say, well, you told me it's just for information only. I don't have to do it.
I think it's, then we put the standard conditions
Standard
and then the
Okay.
conditions of approval.
Okay,
so you want,
that's good. But the portion that says the owner makes the following representations regarding the subject property, everything from that point on is gone. Okay,
Maybe what we could, if you approve this motion, then staff can, prepare the letter that goes out that has this, and we'll present that to you next time for your information.
probably a good idea at this point.
Does
Is there a second?
Does that meet?
Let's hear the motion restated.
Specific to variance.
I got to make one last thing. It sounded like Sean said this
Conditional use
project
permits?
was it was originally, you guys had this big grand idea of building this thing and putting the TV in and all that. And it sounds like because of these codes and regulations and things, you weren't able to even do what you originally wanted. And now we're at this point where you're doing part of a project. And I'm sorry about that. I wish you were able to do what you wanted on your property, so.
Okay, before this motion gets a second, Jamie, what's your, do you have a handle on it?
I do.
Sorry.
Okay, so the motion is that the council is going to approve the appeal regarding condition number 4, where the document will be information only, will not be signed by the applicant, and not recorded on the property.
I'll second the motion.
On condition number 10, we will only leave the first sentence regarding the variance of the oleanders from the site triangle. And we are not, and condition number 10 regarding sidewalk is not approved, is denied.
Is there a second? Yes.
I will second it.
Motion's been moved and
Wait,
seconded.
hold on.
One more thing.
Yeah.
It's really not, it's not for, instead of saying for information only, could we just say, this variance is subject to the following, then we have specific conditions of approval, and then we have general conditions.
I like that.
Yeah. Let's
Because that's
keep
the
some teeth with the
statutory
planning
language.
commission here, or we're
Variance,
gonna,
according to the statute, is approved with conditions, and these are the conditions.
No, I prefer that language. I think that makes more sense.
Okay, so was motion by Councilmember Legero.
yes, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Alves.
Okay,
Hey, and now it's open for discussion. The motion on the table is open for discussion. Not everybody's gonna get everything that they want, but if everybody can live with this, these are my 2 cents worth. Just think about it. If everybody can live with this, okay. Does anybody have any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion passes 5-0. Okey dokey. Don't everybody leave yet. We have a lot more. A lot more. Everybody stays. Okay. Where's my
what did he say?
book at? My Thing fell asleep here.
Oh,
Borrowing this? Okay.
yeah, it's
What's the
our,
next
it's our
one?
hearing thing.
Item
Oh, here we
9,
go.
consideration of approving non-profit organization.
Non-crop what?
Non-profit organization
I
application.
have no idea.
Next item, staff is recommending.
Prefer
Oh,
not
Tammy,
to.
is this you, Tammy?
Yes, it is. I'm here.
Okay, go for it.
Staff is recommending that the city council consider the approval of the application from Escalon Educational Foundation to our nonprofit organization list for reduced fees for the use of the city facilities, specifically the community center.
I was a member of that board, but I'm no longer a member of that board. Do I have to use myself, or can I?
You have no financial gain on it, so then you wouldn't have to.
Unless you feel like you cannot be objective.
Yes.
I feel pretty objective tonight.
I just have a quick comment on
Go
that.
ahead, go ahead.
So the community center is not profitable, right? We have to subsidize it.
Correct.
Yes.
So why do we have any reduced fees for anybody? You know, if your business isn't making any money, you got to close, sell it, go, raise prices. Why do we have a nonprofit? Everybody's on the nonprofit list. Nobody that goes there is, a for-profit thing.
Well, we do have some, but yeah, you're right.
It's
We
not
do, but I
fiscally
guess-
responsible.
Well, in a sense, it's a community center that is supported by taxes. So I guess you can look at it as it's our way of supporting the community too, in assisting these nonprofits that give back to the community.
It's like the rec program, or like E-Trans.
Yeah, I
mean, None
understand.
of these are fiscally, on the, not responsible, you know what I'm saying?
They're not moneymakers anyhow.
All right.
That's,
We don't live in a perfect world yet.
is any further discussion on item number 9? With the
Second.
motion been moved to second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, signify by saying nay. Motion passes 5-0. Public hearing, item number 10, amending the E-Trans fare structure.
Yes.
Yes.
Mayor and council, just request, we had scheduled a public hearing to eliminate the separate Route 1 fare and associated pass to Modesto, charge a local fare on all E-Trans services, accept transfers from RTD Van Go service at no additional cost, and reduce the senior fare to $60 and allow veterans with ID to ride at a discount rate.
So weed.
Okay.
This is hopefully to increase ridership, simplify the fare structure, and have it match RTD's fare structure.
This is a public hearing. Before I open it up to the public, are there any initial comments from the council? No? This is a public hearing again, and it is at this point open to the public. Please respond if you have any comments to make regarding this issue. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to council.
Move on staff's recommendation.
I'll second that if it's a action.
Yeah.
item.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yep. Motion's been moved and seconded to accept the amended E-transfer structure. All those in favor, please, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Very good, motion passes 5-0. This next item, I will need to be leaving the room because there is a theoretical conflict of interest financially, but I know I won't be alone.
As will I.
So I will turn the gavel over to you. Go to bed.
Alrighty then. Okay. Which one are we on? We're on the,
Item number 11.
number 11. Okey dokey.
So, before the council tonight is the Bellaterra Estates Landscape Maintenance District, public hearing on levy assessment and confirmation of diagram and assessment for fiscal year 2019, 2020. At the last council meeting, there was questions regarding the procedures that we were following in adopting the assessments. And our legal counsel did provide feedback on that and confirm that it is in their opinion that we are following the proper procedures.
There you have it. So, this is a public hearing?
Yes, it is.
We will open up the public hearing, take input from the community, and we got none. Okay, then we'll bring it back to the council for discussion. Gentlemen,
Move on staff's recommendation.
we have a motion to move on staff. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Carries 3-0.
You thought you were gonna have time to eat, huh?
They tried.
That sort of threw me off there.
I got more energy. Let's go a couple
Let's
more hours.
go.
Item number 12, proposed city budget for fiscal year 2019 and 2020. Tammy, this is yours.
Yes, it is. So tonight, staff is asking the council to hold a public hearing to adopt the proposed city budget for fiscal year 2019-2020. Doesn't look like we have anybody new from our workshop, but if there's any additional items or presentation that you want me to go over for this item, I can.
Anybody? This is a public hearing.
Yes.
So I will need to open it up to the public. Let's begin it now.
Sorry to be so late. But, so this budget is the entirety of this report, which includes the fiscal policies. And as I brought up in the workshop, we do have an aggressively pursue new development. I'd like to have that changed unless someone is really in favor of an aggressive home building policy. You know, we're sticking to our growth ordinance unless.
I'm not quite sure, Gary. Tell me what
So-
you're
Okay,
going to do.
item one,
Item 1, the very last page.
Is it the language that bothers you?
Yes.
it's the policy of using staff time and staff dollars to aggressively pursue home development.
Gary, what page is this?
Number 2 on, it's tab 1, excuse me, yeah.
Go back.
Tab 1, the very last page.
Is it just
Page
residential
3.
you're concerned with? or-
Well, that, and I'd like to see the elimination of references to the RDA since we never did get an RDA.
Okay, so you want to remove the RDA and you want the language used to describe aggressive approaching for development? Struck out, and then what was the other? what about-
I'd say pursue businesses that add to the economic base, particularly those that generate sales tax and tax increment revenue.
To aggressively, please restate that.
So just take out new development and in that very first checkpoint, right?
Yes.
And can we just give council consensus on these two items before we vote? I mean, versus working them into the motion. I think we've had plenty of exercise with complex motions tonight.
Say,
As noted, yeah. yeah.
Okay.
But I would like council consensus so we can get a
Well,
vote on those.
Let me do that so we know we're okay. From what Gary was talking about, how does everybody feel?
Redevelopment.
I agree.
You know why Brown took the money
You
back.
okay with that?
So it's, in the
Are you guys okay with
it's
what
not
Gary
in-
was just talking about?
I'm sorry, Jay, what did you say?
Oh, okay.
What I said the first time.
Oh, I got it, I got it.
Yeah, just remove, pursue new development and remove all references to the RDA.
Well, yeah, I have no issue with any of that.
Just, so
I think
he
we should
wants
have
us,
been more
yeah,
like-
nude that one.
Work with
and
new
then-
people.
Because of when these policies
it's
were
just
put
not
in place,
aggressively-
because they were put in
Yeah.
place for so long.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, we could aggressively.
Because it makes it sound like we're gonna get rid of the
It's-
75%.
does
Has that always been in there? Like, that's just
No,
been
it
in there?
just came up.
No, it's been in there.
Which
The-
part?
it- This policy is, that's,
That wording's always been there? I never noticed it.
I didn't change it.
25 years later.
This is what, it's the policy that was accepted by the council, yes.
There you go.
yeah,
Okay.
to be honest, I missed it also, but since there's some question on
Okay.
the growth ordinance,
And
I'd
the
like that
RDA is
clarified.
coming out too?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there is no such thing as RDAs.
Anymore,
No,
yeah.
Brown kept that money. Thinker.
So we have consensus on those two items before we move forward?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay?
That's, everyone said yes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there anything else? Al, I see you moving. No?
Yeah, he's just trying to breathe.
All right. If there aren't any more comments on the public hearing, we will close the public hearing and move it back to council.
Okay, I would move that we accept the budget as corrected. Isn't that what we want to say? As corrected?
fine.
Yeah. As proposed.
I'll second that.
Motion's been moved in second. Discussion. Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And, I might too. And all those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion passes 5-0. Council Communications, Councilmember Crumick.
Thank you, Mayor Swift. Yes, Supervisor Wynn said I went to my first LAFCO meeting, and that was really interesting. I got right into, it was kind of intimidating. I mean, it's in the big Stockton kind of chambers, and the city of Tracy was there, and they wanted to basically go outside of LAFCO's recommendation to do some growth. And they, like, the mayor was there and all the staff and all the council people and a bunch of these developers. And it was interesting because, you know, I'm sitting up there. I'm a new council person, and I'm on this committee, and we have this authority over this one town. And the recommendation from Jim Glazer, the director of LAFCO, which is basically the only employee of LAFCO for this area, which I thought was interesting. He's got like a couple part-time people, but his recommendation was to not approve the city of Tracy and what the city of Tracy wanted to do. And it was interesting to me that, you know, one governing body can tell another what to do. And to me, it just really didn't sit right. And so I had to speak up a little bit and say, who am I to sit up here and on this committee and tell the city of Tracy what they can and cannot do when they clearly want to do it? All the mayor does, and the council and the developers, that's what they want. So I found it, and they used the word local control, and I said that's really important. And so anyways, it was interesting. And I think that LAFCO and the other guys on the commission are going to let Tracy do what the city wants to do and not get in the way. It was interesting. So that was one thing. And I know it's late, but is there any possibility of putting playground equipment on the Main Street Park, or is that a conflict with the railroad?
Well, I mean, it would take some funds.
Well, I was thinking for
appropriation of
Kiwanis
funds.
and maybe other local Lions, if we joined up, we could. And then Kiwanis has a thing where they match funds. So like we came up with like 25 or 50 grand, and they could, you know, match it, and we could put a nice playground there.
Yeah, I mean, we always run the risk because it is the railroad's property, like any improvements that we
How
do.
far? Like 50 feet, right, from the railroad, or 20?
No, it's the whole park we lease from the railroad.
Oh, well, that's new information. I didn't know.
Yeah. So every time we do improvements on there, there's always a risk
Okay.
that the
I'll
railroad
talk to you
could
about it
come in
later.
and say, remove it, but it doesn't mean that we can't do it because, you know, obviously we've did things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That equipment there could add to a lot of other problems.
Yeah, that's true. That's
For the events and your open space, whether, yeah.
yeah, restrooms. Yeah.
You get the homeless.
Well, that's the last thing I had was that when Supervisor Wynn talked about the homeless issue and stuff, and I really feel like, again, you know, he made this comment that there's not enough staff, there's not enough money to handle the homeless issue, and I think that's always the answer. Is we don't have enough stuff to deal with this, and I think it's that there is too much. There's too much social welfare out there that it enables homelessness, and I think if people were homeless. And it wasn't. I don't know. I'm not going to go too far down that path. But anyways, that's all I got.
Councilmember Chronic, thank you. Councilmember Legero.
Thank you, Mayor Swift. Lively discussion tonight. Thank you very much. I think we need to revisit the documentation some more down the road. We were kind of under a crunch with this particular project, but this particular project highlighted a lot of issues that probably hadn't been considered for a number of years. So thank you for the input and the discussion. We'll keep working on that. We'll keep working on the sidewalk ordinance and also the sewer line ordinance to see if we can clean that up since those issues have been brought up. I read an interesting article on 3D crosswalks, and I thought that was pretty awesome. 2 elementary school students came up with an idea to where one of the kids' brother was almost hitting a crosswalk. So they came up with an idea to make 3D crosswalks. So as you approach the crosswalk, it actually appears that the striping lifts from the road to look like concrete blocks.
That's so cool. I've seen that.
And it seemed like such a simple
in the budget
fix that we should start. And this particular jurisdiction is using that type of crosswalk around all their schools. So I thought that's something that we could look into. I think I forwarded the email to you. So
Sweet.
I thought that was pretty interesting. So, and I received my water main break notice in the mail. So,
Oh, yeah, we didn't go over that in staff communications.
That's all I got. Thanks.
Councilmember Legero, thank you. Councilmember Merkin.
It's come up a couple of times now, and we've kind of never really addressed it. It came up again tonight about speed bumps. I've never been a fan of speed bumps until I saw the ones in Riverbank. Did you ever get a chance to go over and look at those?
Yeah, I have not in Riverbank.
And I've seen them in Stockton now.
What
They're-
street?
In Riverbank, didn't you say by the theater?
Yeah, if you turn, it's on Jackson Avenue. And in Stockton, I've seen they're on Adelbert, Sinclair, a lot of those on East Stockton. They're a very wide speed bump, so you don't get that vicious bounce to it unless you're going fast.
I think they're called speed islands.
That could be. Yeah, because it's not really a bump, it's more like an island.
Sure.
That goes across the road.
Like a platform on
Yeah.
top.
And the street he's talking about out there, there's no place to put a stop sign.
Yeah.
There's no logical place to put a stop sign, I should say. So maybe that's something we could look at on these long residential streets where, a stop sign is impractical, and maybe out on Stanislaus Street.
One on California, too.
The list will be coming.
We'll probably get a lot of requests if we put them in and they work. Yeah. I wouldn't mind trying one.
Sure.
See how it works. If it's successful, then look into doing more of them.
Okay.
But it's, I don't know of any other way of stopping the traffic out there. I mean, I agree with the guy. You see the
Can we
speed
do
sign out
those in the
there, it works the
crosswalk?
first day, and then from then on, it doesn't. So,
I'm in favor of that, like, just get one out there and see the response.
Little test pilot one.
yeah. And then what Peter said a while ago about, sitting on LAFCO, you have to remember, because I sat on COG too, and you're not there representing your city. You're there representing the region.
There you go.
And you have to change hats periodically. There are times when you do stick up for your city. There are other times that you put on your regional hat and you look at the region instead of just your little niche. And it's different. It's really different. So, yeah. That's all I got.
Councilmember Morgan, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Alves.
Tonight is a good lesson, as much as, it's just one of those things this evening that I think the people have to understand that there's never a perfect ever finish. It's just the way this stuff goes. 25 years, we've been dealing with this. I didn't even know that language was in this thing Gary pointed out tonight. I've been doing this for 25 years. You're never gonna get everything right. You're always gonna have these ups and downs, in and outs. The idea is to fix it the best you can. You can't do any exemptions for anything because then the next person wants it. It's ugly. As far as those people not getting what they want, Peter, I agree with you, that's a bummer. But I don't have a good answer for you. As far as your LAFCO thing, like Walt said, it's a regional thing. It's, if you give Tracy the right to build, and they start sucking more water out of that water plant out there, then what's gonna happen? What if we take our water away from them, then what are they gonna do? So it's a bigger picture. It's not just about what they want, it's about what the region wants. And unfortunately, you dance with everybody, you don't dance at all. Yeah,
write that
that's the
down.
way it is. And I think these ordinances we're gonna be dealing with coming up in the next few days, meetings, I should say, they're gonna be tough decisions. They're gonna be tough decisions. There's some more that this council is gonna wanna decipher, because in the longest time they've been there, and we've never really been comfortable with them. And it's gonna be a collaboration between staff and us to try to find a solution that it's a mitigation of where everyone's gonna get something and no one's gonna get everything. And that's just the way this plays every damn time. There's no way around it. So, I've had my little say, I'm done for the night.
Mayor Pro Tem Alves, thank you very much. Hey, I'd like to thank the diehards in the audience. Jeez, you guys are hardcore. By the way, thanks staff, everybody. Everybody's still halfway awake. We knew it was going to be a long night. Personally, I thought it would go till 10, and look at the time. So, since there's no meeting, since there probably won't be any meeting on July 1st, don't forget, Park Feet, July 12th and 13th. Senior Mr. and Miss Escalon on the 9th of July. Senior Mr. and Miss Escalon, July 9th. Miss Escalon, July 10th. It's going to be a great week of fun. We hope to see you all there, and good night.
Mailing list, all the tags for them already done. I've got to